Chapter 127. Guanshan looked at the woman in white in front of him, whose messy black hair covered half of her face. His eyes widened, and he almost jumped up in fright. What the F*** CK? Ghost! Guanshan widened his eyes and looked in horror at the woman in white who suddenly walked out from behind the sofa. Then he saw the phone in her hand. The phone was still ringing. Wait, her phone is ringing? Guanshan looked at the phone in the woman's hand, and then looked at his own phone and fell into deep thought. Could it be that she was his exclusive customer service lady? Shuman Lin? Guanshan asked cautiously. Shuman Lin was also very nervous. She nodded cautiously and turned off her phone's ringtone to prove that she was indeed Guanshan's customer service. She whispered, "Yes, I have heard your conversation just now. So, do you want me to file it now? If you want to bring people over, I can immediately inform the logistics team to dispatch them." This was the first time she had a face-to-face conversation with Guanshan. Although it was a bit awkward, it was the first official step of communication. Compared to Guanshan's previous indifference, taking the initiative to involve the Tan formation in the process of action, instead of using the Tan formation as a logistics team, was already a milestone progress. On the other side, Guanshan looked at the phone interface in his hand that had been hung up at the same time. He couldn't help but facepalm. My goodness, so the person who scared Jiang Xian to the point of hospitalization was you? Jiang Xian really couldn't be blamed for being timid. A person appeared out of nowhere and dressed exactly like Sadako. Who could stand it? This is too scary. However, it turns out that she has been hiding behind the sofa all this time. Fortunately, I didn't do anything strange just now. Otherwise, wouldn't I have died? Guanshan rejoiced for a moment, then asked warily, "You've been following me all this time?" Shuman Lin quickly shook her head and waved her hands. Of course not. No. After you officially joined the Tan formation, I was no longer in charge of observing you. Instead, I was in charge of monitoring Li Li. You should be able to tell from the details of the information you received. Oh, then it's fine. Guanshan breathed a sigh of relief and then froze. Li Li? Shuman Lin said embarrassedly, "It's your dragonly cat." Now, this former male bee of the killer bee was already the mother of several kittens. In a little more than a month, she would welcome childbirth and sterilization. The corner of Guanshan's mouth twitched. He refused to delve into this topic and forcibly changed the subject. That's not important. What's important is that I do need to bring people to Lu Qiuqiu's house to look for clues. Guanshan wanted to take the opportunity to learn more about the composition and information of the Tan formation. He coughed twice, squatted down, and said, "How many ability users of the Tan formation can you use now?" Shuman Lin showed an embarrassed expression. Right now, because we need to investigate the stronghold of the killer bee, the ability users with combat ability are basically all on missions and can't come over. So, the only ability user you can use is me. She pointed at herself and introduced, "My ability is sense of presence. If you need to go undercover or something like that, it's definitely the right choice to look for me." Guanshan. Although Shuman Lin tried to make herself sound useful, Guanshan still heard a message from her words. She was useless. Damn it. At that time, I talked to Lin Wu sincerely for a long time, but in the end, I still have to rely on myself. Guanshan sighed. Okay. Now that things had come to this, he couldn't force them to pull in another ability user who could fight out of thin air. After all, the killer bee had been watching him for a long time. If the Tan formation could get rid of the killer bee, it would also be protecting him in disguise. Their mission was a bit more important. Guanshan asked again, "What about the logistics team? Is there any way to detect the traces of ability users?" Shuman Lin nodded. The logistics team of Team 3 has been idle all this time. As for the detection method, with your authority, you can use a high-precision energy level detector. Not only is the precision high, but it can also show the traces left behind by energy level reactions. Guanshan stood up and muttered to himself, "All right, then take this detector with you and find a few post-production personnel to follow me according to your usual operation specifications." Wait, Shuman Lin suddenly stopped him and then took out a small box from her pocket. This headset is for you. After you put it on, adjust the channel, and you can use your mind to communicate with each other. It was just sent from headquarters a few days ago. The Mind headset was a spiritual item. Although it was mass-produced, it wasn't something that could be obtained immediately. It took about a month to make, so it was only now that it was given to Guanshan. Guanshan opened it and looked at it, and then tried to put it on. He found that it fit perfectly with his ear and ear canal. Presumably, the headset was also custom-made. Thank you. Guanshan thanked her politely. Shuman Lin quickly waved her hand and said, No need, no need. This is what I should do. Guanshan stretched out his hand. Shuman Lin was stunned and looked up at the former with a blank face. Guanshan said helplessly, You don't want to get up? You've been squatting behind the sofa. Aren't you tired? Oh. Only then did Lin Shuman react. She shook her head very carefully and got up on her own. I'm used to it. When I'm doing missions, I often need to stay motionless or not eat or drink all day. When I encounter some psychic and vigilant ability users, I can't even make any movements. Squatting in the corner or behind the sofa, I'm used to it. Or should I call it an occupational disease? Guanshan smiled. He felt that the life of these psychics seemed to be more colorful than he had imagined. He joked, Be careful not to turn into a mushroom. Shuman Lin thought that this person was indeed in a green state, as judged by psychologists. He was friendly, gentle, and even a little humorous. But as long as one had seen Guanshan in battle, no one would really think that he was harmless. Guanshan said again, By the way, what kind of people are in your logistics team? After Lu Qiuqiu hung up the phone, she waited anxiously at home. She had already looked for all the clues in the house. The study and living room were all in a mess, as if they had just been ransacked. However, before she returned home, the house was actually as tidy as usual. Lu Mingyi was a person with mild misophobia and obsessive-compulsive disorder, so the furnishings in the house were always neat and tidy. When Lu Qiuqiu returned home, there was even a cup of warm coffee on the table in the study, as if Lu Mingyi was still at home. But then she searched the whole house and couldn't find Lu Mingyi. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. Guanshan was finally here. Lu Qiuqiu immediately went to the door in surprise and opened it. There were several burly men standing outside the door. Each of them had arms big enough to run horses and chests big enough to crush rocks. They wore camouflage uniforms and had dark skin. If they put on a hood, they would immediately go to the Middle East to become a bandit. Lu Qiuqiu subconsciously took 2 steps back, but saw Guanshan squeeze through the burly men and smiled awkwardly. I'm a staff member. I look a little fierce. Don't mind me. PS1. Thank you for Yu Miao's tip. PS2. Knock on the bowl. Please vote. Chapter 128. Lu Qiuqiu was shocked to see Guanshan walk in. 2 of the burly men immediately stood shoulder to shoulder and turned around to guard the door. The remaining 3 men followed behind Guanshan and walked in. They were silent and restrained. They were obviously well-trained. Staff. You call them staff. What kind of staff can dress up like special forces members who are here to encircle and suppress terrorists? They even have guns in their hands. And more importantly, aren't you a reporter? Lu Qiuqiu was at a loss. Her impression of Guanshan as a mysterious, righteous reporter with strong investigative skills instantly collapsed. How could a reporter make a phone call and bring a group of armed men to their door? Lu Qiuqiu suddenly thought of a guess she had before. Could it be that the Sacred-Cœur Hospital was really collapsed by Guanshan? She had thought it was nonsense before, but now she felt that it was 90% likely. Guanshan saw her dazed expression and comforted her. They're really just staff. They're just from a special department. Don't worry, they're all legal and have ID. The burly men immediately took out their ID and showed it to Lu Qiuqiu. They were very professional and explained the existence of the Tan formation to her. So that's how it is. Lu Qiuqiu didn't quite understand, but she reluctantly accepted the fact. She suddenly became more anxious. So, my dad's disappearance might be a supernatural event? The probability is very high. Where did your dad go missing? Guanshan looked around the interior of the house as he spoke. He found that although there were only 2 floors, the area was ridiculously large. Although he had exclaimed outside when he first arrived, it was a different story when he really came in. This Dr. Liu's house was actually an old mansion located near the suburbs. Just by looking at this old house, one could tell that it was very old. It would not be out of place to use it as a museum or a famous person's former residence. Compared to the Shun family's small villa, it was a world of difference. Its value was probably unimaginable. He didn't expect Dr. Liu to be a rich man in disguise. Of course, this house was not bought by her family. It had been passed down from the ancestors of the Liu family. It was a symbol of the accumulation of famous doctors from generation to generation. On the way here, Guanshan had already read the information provided by the logistics team. He had a rough idea of what kind of person Lu Qiuqiu was. Generally speaking, he had been practicing medicine all his life. He was highly respected, especially in the field of mental illness. Lu Qiuqiu was also influenced by her family. Such a person had almost no flaws and no enemies. The only person who might have had a conflict with him in his career had died of a sudden cerebral hemorrhage a few years ago. Therefore, the possibility of vendetta could be ruled out. It had to be said that this logistics team was really efficient. Although they all looked like fierce bandits, they were actually enthusiastic and cheerful young men. However, Guanshan's focus was not on whether it was a vendetta or whether Lu Mingyi had gone missing himself. If this was a horror movie or a horror game, the appearance of the word mansion was already a flag in itself. However, for Guanshan, who had the simulator, this flag was already an established fact. It was just like when an enemy fell from the sky. No one could resist the urge to raise a crowbar. A horror game simulator would probably not let go of such a classic horror game scene, right? But didn't Lu Mingyi go missing? That means this shouldn't be the main battlefield, so I should be safe for now. Guanshan felt that his analysis was very reasonable. Could it be that the kidnapper also had the habit of coming back to check out the crime scene and wait to be caught? Lu Qiuqiu led the way to the second floor and opened the door to the study. This is the place. This morning, when I received the hospital's notice to leave, he was still here reading. I even made him a cup of coffee. But when I came back this morning, he was already gone. Lu Qiuqiu pointed at the coffee cup on the table. At the time, I came in and found no one there, but the coffee was still warm. I thought he might have gone to sleep, but I had something to ask him. So I tried to knock on the door, but the door was not closed at all. Later, I searched the whole house, but could not find him. The police also asked around who might have seen him, but they all said no. Wait a minute. Guanshan noticed a point. Isn't your father almost 50 this year? Why would he stay up late to read and drink coffee? Lu Qiuqiu was startled, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In private, he is a workaholic. Even though he keeps telling his old colleagues that he wants to stay healthy and not do research, in reality, he has been preparing his thesis and publishing books. He has been like this since he was young. According to the current popular term, he should be a study B*TCH. I also think this is bad for his health, so I tried to advise him against it, but every time I dragged him for a physical examination, everything was normal. He might even be healthier than some young people who don't pay attention to their health, and he was so proud of it. Guanshan blushed with shame. He felt that he had been inexplicably implicated before he had the simulator. His life was irregular, and he often had backaches, but there was no illness. It was just that he lacked exercise. However, when he thought about it, he suddenly felt that it was unreasonable for a man in his 50s to stay up all night without any illness. Could it be the effect of the Xitigarbha statue? Guanshan turned to the logistics team and said, "Check this place first and see if there are any clues." Yes, the logistics team said in unison. Lu Qiuqiu was shocked. Once again, she felt that Guanshan was not an ordinary reporter. However, she still didn't quite understand what the Taiyan formation meant. Did it mean that not only did they solve supernatural incidents, but they also had superpowers? Lu Qiuqiu couldn't help but sneak a glance at Guanshan. Her mind was filled with thoughts. What kind of superpower did this person have to be able to make the hospital collapse? Guanshan watched them struggle from the side. He walked to the table and observed. It wasn't that he suddenly learned how to order people around with his prestige of the authority. It was that he didn't know how to use this energy level detector. This was the so-called, in order to cover up the fact that he was actually a piece of trash, he could only let his subordinates do it. Where does your father usually put the statue? Guanshan asked as he looked at the coffee cup. Lu Qiuqiu pointed to the antique shelf next to them. Here, he treasures the statue. He doesn't even let me touch it. He even made a protective glass cover. Guanshan looked at the cover on the shelf. It was empty. There was nothing inside. At this time, the logistics team reported with a serious face. There are traces of an energy level detector. It's very strong. It almost covers the entire study room. However, it's very scattered and very uniform. Guanshan didn't understand. Seeing that they didn't look too good, he asked, "Isn't this normal?" The logistics team said, "According to experience, it's not normal. Generally speaking, the traces left behind by mutants should be singular. Just like the fingerprints of criminals, they can only appear in certain places that they have touched." I get it now. The criminal couldn't have searched the entire room, and the paranormals couldn't have crawled around in this room. Guanshan was dazed. Then, he remembered Qin Duang, who had transformed into the entire apartment. A chill ran down his spine. Mutants couldn't crawl around, but they could become the entire room. Now, he knew how to activate the storyline of the simulator. Guanshan immediately pulled Lu Qiuqiu and ran out. "Let's go out first." He might have never left this room. He had just taken 2 steps and pulled open the door when he found that there was a wall outside. This wall blocked the entire door. It was as if this was a fake door. Scene scan complete. F*CKU. P.S. Thanks to Cross Dressing and Lin and Great Old 1A for their tips. Chapter 129. Scenario scan complete. Generating horror game. Generated horror game. Haunted house. Scenario loading. Please wait. Scenario loading complete. Due to a case, you follow a friend and several police officers to visit her family's old mansion. However, you discover a shocking secret in the study room. There is no one there, but someone is breathing. You want to escape, but you find that there is a wall outside the door. Behind you, asterisk note, only by killing the final boss will this simulation end. The familiar mechanical voice rang out beside Guanshan's ears. This time, however, it was different from all the previous times. Because this time, Guanshan was certain that the real person was behind him, holding his hand. Once the simulator was activated, the world before him would surely change. Guanshan had once thought that this change would bring him into a strange space between reality and illusion. Now, however, he understood that this was just a layer of skin created by the simulator. What was underneath was, in fact, the real world. At that very moment, this 8th instance dungeon was the time for him to verify the truth of the simulator and experience it for himself. The simulator, just what will happen to Dr. Liu and the people from the logistics team. Guanshan took a deep breath. The wall before him was made entirely of red bricks. It had not even been painted. At that moment, however, the red bricks were oozing red blood. Additionally, the amount of blood was so great that it had drowned the texture of the bricks and flowed to the floor. Additionally, many white molds grew out from the areas that were drowned by the blood. Like strands, they swayed their slender and hairy bodies. It was a very disgusting sight. As Guanshan did not know if the blood had any negative effects, he took 2 steps back to a safe distance. Then, with a complicated and nervous feeling, he turned around and saw one. No, for NPCs. Guanshan followed the hand that he was holding and looked up. What he saw was not Lu Qiuqiu's face. Instead, it was an unfamiliar face with a very Western style. This was a face that could be considered beautiful, but it was blonde hair and blue eyes. Her eyes were bright, and her skin was fair. She looked like Audrey Hepburn, but there were some freckles on her face. Guanshan's eyelids twitched. Damn, the plot is set overseas this time. Rows of information then appeared beside him. You have encountered an NPC. Friend, Victoria, LV, 2, HP, 200 description. Your good friend Victoria is a psychiatrist. If you suspect that you are abnormal, perhaps you can look for her? What the F***CK are you talking about? You're the abnormal one. Guanshan suspected that he had been insulted by the simulator, but he had no evidence. He then looked at the other strong logistics guys in the room. He found that they had become very standard foreigners. Their faces were full of whiskers, and their body shapes had changed slightly. They were wearing police uniforms from an unknown country, but the positions of their weapons had not changed. Police A. LV4 HP 600 description. This is a fully armed, safe, and reliable police officer. Then, may I ask, what is his mortality rate? The remaining two were Police B and Police C. The corners of Guan Shan's mouth twitched. This description is really wicked. In horror movies and horror games, except for the main characters, the mortality rate of police officers should be 100%. They are destined to die as soon as they appear. Why do I feel that the simulator is becoming more and more naughty? But from the level evaluation of the simulator, those who can become logistics personnel of the Taiyan formation are indeed not simple. I remember that Fong Minmin, who is actually a D-class ability user, was only level 6 in the carnivorous restaurant instance. However, these logistics personnel without abilities could reach level 4. If they can get some heavy weapons, I'm afraid they can be on par with D-class ability users. But this is indeed reasonable. The damage that D-class ability users can cause to society is not much different from what heavy weapons can do. Guan Shan let out a long breath. He finally confirmed with his own eyes that the simulator had turned everything he saw into a virtual reality, and not a virtual reality. Everyone come here. Come to my side. Guan Shan took out the netherworld goblin blade, put on the mask of pain, and whispered. However, even if these logistics personnel could be on par with D-class ability users, it did not mean that they could not be killed by C-class ability users. The difference between the ranks of ability users was like a tree and an ant. It was impossible to surmount. Guan Shan looked at the seat of the desk warily. Then he saw the blood on the ground flow into the chair. Then it grabbed the legs of the chair and condensed on the chair to form a human figure. The human figure was completely composed of blood. When it opened its mouth, its head split open in the shape of a mouth, which was filled with normal human teeth. Hee. I have been waiting for you here for a long time. As expected, as long as there is enough bait to set up a trap, someone will definitely take the bait. The experience of a hunter is never wrong. The human figure made of blood let out a strange laugh. Then it said, "You will stay here with this house. Rot, decay, die, and then go crazy." Guan Shan vaguely felt that what he heard was definitely not the real words of this guy. However, it was useless to understand it now. The most important thing now was to kill the boss and ensure safety. The guy in front of him was the final boss of the simulation. Boss Murder Room, Phantom, of 17, health points, 42,000, description, cannot leave, cannot see, cannot hear, cannot touch. Where are you? Whoosh! This time, Guan Shan immediately rushed forward as fast as he could when he saw the information clearly. In the eyes of outsiders, it was almost like a thunderbolt. He dodged and stepped on the desk. The buzzing sound of the blade cutting through the air had not stopped. The blade had already fallen. The bloody man's face twisted into a surprised expression. It leaned back and reached out to catch the blade. However, Guan Shan's purpose was not to cut it, but to use the death god's finger bone. However, the moment he reached out to touch the bloody man, he did not touch the real body. Instead, it went through the other party's body. Guan Shan's eyes widened as he watched the bloody man being sliced apart like a bubble before dissipating into the air. The expression on the bloody man's face changed from surprise to mockery. It laughed and said, "Where do you think you are? In this room? Wrong. You're no longer here." It disappeared like a bubble. Then, the blood on the floor of the room began to increase, and the water level began to rise. P.S. Thank you very little Lang for the tip. Chapter 130. Illusion. Guan Shan's pupils constricted as he looked at the bloody figure that disappeared like an illusion. He was a little confused for a moment. What did it mean by that? If I'm not in this room, where else can I be? However, one thing was very obvious. The real body of the boss should not be in this room. This bloody figure was just a projection. At this moment, Guan Shan turned around and saw that the 4 NPCs were already standing in the bloody water. Half of their shoes were submerged. However, There were no abnormalities in their status bars, and their health points did not decrease. The water did not seem to have any negative effects, but even if it was just a slightly strange color, it would definitely drown people if it continued to rise. Guanshan was still very uncomfortable facing the panicked woman with an unfamiliar face. He tentatively shouted, "Dr. Liu?" The blonde Caucasian girl in his eyes hurried over and said anxiously, "Who was that just now? Was he the one who kidnapped my dad? Is this the kind of psychic that you guys are talking about?" As soon as this friend, Victoria, spoke, Guanshan was dumbfounded. Good heavens, this was an authentic old London accent. There was not a single row to be seen, it was all tunnels. Amazing, the simulator was really F***king accurate. It even downloaded a foreign language voice pack for him. It looked like a foreigner, but in fact, it was really a foreigner. It was the same inside and outside. Forget it, this idiotic simulator did not have a physical body, so it could not be heard. If Guanshan's foreign language was not bad, he would have directly shut himself in. Forget about information, he would not even need to communicate. But why was the boss speaking Chinese? There was a domestic ghost living in a Caucasian house. Was it a mysterious power from the east? Guanshan had reason to suspect that this was because he wanted to reduce the difficulty by bringing people with him. So the simulator directly changed the voice pack to increase the difficulty. A dog, this was a real dog. But at least it was only Guanshan's one-sided perception that changed. Lu Qiuqiu and the others could still understand what he was saying. Guanshan calmed himself down and nodded. Yes, it should be him. I didn't expect him to be waiting here. I don't know if he's targeting the Tan formation or me. It wasn't that he was narcissistic. If it wasn't for the fact that he had already offended 2 criminal organizations, he wouldn't want to be targeted. If this boss was here for the second Xidagarba statue, he could have tied Lu Mingyi up and left with the statue. Since he had taken the extra step of waiting here, he must have some other purpose. However, I don't know his identity. Do you have any clues in your logistics database? Guanshan looked at Officer A, Officer B, and Officer C. When he saw their bearded faces, he was a little stunned. Officer A was also fluent in a foreign language. He shook his head. There's no signal here. We can't contact the outside, so we can't confirm his identity. But it might be a C-grade space ability, user nicknamed room. In their eyes, the way this room was sealed was much simpler and more direct. After Guanshan opened the door, there was only a dark and deep hole outside. There was nothing. But on the other hand, they could still see the normal night scene outside the room's window. It was very strange. Guanshan asked about the ability of this ability user, but the logistics team said that they didn't have enough information. At present, we only know that his ability is to trap people in a certain room, but as for what he will experience, those who can say are already dead. The logistics team explained to Guanshan about the victim list. They also mentioned that the ability user nicknamed room was ranked 291st and was also wanted by the Tan formation. Guanshan. In other words, the death rate of super high-risk ability users was 100%. He had bumped into such a wanted criminal. He had to admit that he was really lucky. Logically speaking, he wasn't very afraid at first, but now he was, forget it. Anyway, it's still safe for now. The blood isn't rising fast. Let's think about how to get out first. Guanshan got down from the table and stepped on the blood pool on the ground. He put away the demon knife and took out the crowbar. I'll try to force the door open later. Get ready. The remaining people looked at each other. Officer A said hesitantly, "Where's the blood?" Guanshan was stunned. You can't see it? He suddenly realized that his point of view was completely different from what others saw. Guanshan fell into deep thought. Was the blood some kind of symbol? Or even if it was fake, if it drowned people later, it would lead to death? Lu Qiuqiu opened her eyes wide and carefully observed his expression. She said cautiously, Your illness is acting up?" Guanshan remembered that he was a mental patient in Dr. Lu's eyes. He was immediately amused and shook his head. "This isn't an illness. You can treat it as my ability. It's just that every time I encounter danger, the world you see will be different." Lu Qiuqiu seemed to understand, but not fully. She was a little embarrassed. So that's how it is. She was shocked by Guanshan's series of swift and fierce movements just now. Her heart was pounding nervously. Then, she looked at the knife and crowbar that appeared out of thin air in his hands. There was a hint of excitement in her heart that overturned her worldview. It turned out that he really was an ability user. Ability users really existed in this world. Wait a minute. So those bloody scenes he told her when he saw her at the Sacred Coeur Hospital were all true. Lu Qiuqiu's excitement was like being doused with cold water. She shrank back and realized that the young man in front of her could have taken countless lives. Guanshan walked to the door blocked by the wall. His mind raced. Combined with the boss's words and its name, I can boldly guess that part of the boss's ability is very likely similar to the ones in Phantom Room or Silent Hill 4. The secret room. It can peel off the entire space. In fact, when we stepped in here, we were already in another parallel space. That was why they couldn't get out, couldn't see, couldn't hear, and couldn't touch at that time. The energy level reaction detected throughout the entire room could be explained. It was because they had already fallen into the trap and entered the space created by the special ability. This ability is indeed powerful. If there's no way out, then there's really no way out. No wonder those who were hit all died. But unfortunately, this person met Guanshan and Guanshan's crowbar. There was no door in this world that he couldn't open. Guanshan sneered and picked up the crowbar. He inserted it into the gap in the door and then pried it in the opposite direction. Gotcha! The brick wall cracked and then collapsed. Their eyes suddenly opened up. There was another room that looked exactly the same. There was also blood in that room, and it was much higher than here. It was about waist level, but after it spread, it only reached the calves. And in the room stood a shocked and haggard old man. "Dad!" Lu Qiuqiu shouted in surprise. She then rushed up to the old man to ask if he was okay. "Dad, how did you become like this?" Guanshan raised his eyebrows. I knew that staying up late every day wouldn't end well. The looming Yi in front of him didn't look like he was 50 years old. He looked more like he was 70 or 80 years old. Guanshan narrowed his eyes. "Wait, this blood doesn't represent the flow of time, right?" PS1. Thank you, Lord Macho. Stealing the Sky's Fantasy. Abe, Very Small Waves Tips. PS2. My mom was discharged from surgery today. I want to pick her up. Chapter 131. The metahuman nicknamed Room was called Carpenter, and he was a mixed blood. Even he couldn't remember how long he had lived on this land. Perhaps it could be traced back to 100 years ago when the foreigners wreaked havoc. Perhaps he was one of the children born because of the atrocities. Because of this, Carpenter was abandoned when he was born and did not receive a proper education. In the past 100 years, he wandered around the human settlements like a ghost, becoming a room for all kinds of murders. Every place with a house could be his habitat. Carpenter's ability, as Guanshan had guessed, was to rely on reality to create a completely sealed, illusory space that could be set with the laws of time. The person in this space, from the position, was still in the original room. However, this person's actions would not affect the original room at all, even if they were in the room and could see the scenery outside as usual. Looking at it from another perspective, Carpenter's ability was closer to the simulator that Guanshan had envisioned in the beginning. During this long period of wandering, Carpenter rarely showed himself. Instead, he hid in the space he created and set up a still time for himself. The price was that he would never be able to leave this place and would not be able to affect the people outside. Once he left, the laws of time would lose effect and the time would flow again, which would be the time he died. The only thing that caused those people to be unable to return was the accelerated flow of time, not Carpenter himself. No one can leave after stepping into this place, including myself. At one point, Carpenter used this phrase as his motto. It was the same this time. Originally, he was confident and certain. Therefore, after Carpenter mocked them for a while, he leisurely left the isolated space where Guanshan and the others were trapped. He continued to observe the labyrinth he built from the perspective of a god. After so many years, although he was only a C rank, Carpenter's ability was no longer limited to creating a single space. His strength was enough to create 20 parallel spaces in a single room. However, this was only a situation where ordinary people were trapped. If the target was an ability user, then the increased load would lead to a change in the number of spaces as the target's energy level increased. For example, at this moment, he had only trapped 3 metahumans. One was a Class C, one was a Class B, and the last one was the incompetent Class Guanshan. The number of spaces he could create was around 5. Carpenter was a ghost in the room. Although he wasn't in the real world, he was able to create an identical parallel space to obtain certain information. Therefore, he knew that Lu Mingyi had obtained the Xidagarba statue. He also knew that the detective named Byakuya had helped Lu Mingyi to obtain the Xidagarba statue. He even placed a miniature camera in Lu Mingyi's study to monitor the latter. This Byakuya's ability is quite strong. It's actually the unravel of the rules. Unfortunately, he encountered me in an environment completely separated from the original time and space. There are no elements that can unravel. Carpenter looked at the middle-aged man sitting on the table in the other room and sneered. TSK, what a pity. An innate Class B ability user. If he could continue to grow, his future would be limitless. What a pity, he will die soon. His voice was transmitted to Byakuya's room. Are you really not going to consider cooperating with me? I admire your ability, but there's a saying in Huaxia, a wise man submits to circumstances. Or is it that the past month hasn't made you realize the truth? You can't get out, so give up. You only have 2 choices. One is to die of old age here. The other is to tell me the clues you found and lead me to the location of the other half of the Xidagarba statue. You're only 19 years old. It shouldn't have been more than 3 years since you awakened your ability. Do you want to die of old age here? Are you unwilling to accept this? Carpenter's words were filled with temptation and mockery. In the past month, he had repeated these words hundreds of times, but Byakuya still didn't respond. Thus, Byakuya turned from a youth to a middle-aged man. This time, Byakuya opened his eyes and snorted. He raised his middle finger. Idiot! Carpenter was stunned. Then, he said angrily, Byakuya sneered. Even if I tell you, you will at most adjust the flow of time to normal. You won't let me leave this place. Then, you can continue to threaten me to find a Xidagarba statue for you and kill me. If you let me out, wouldn't that be the end of your only entry, no exit attitude? You can't accept this, right? I guess you're in such a hurry to find the Xidagarba statue because you want to prolong your life, right? Byakuya proudly raised his head and said righteously, since I'm going to die anyway, I won't let another vicious criminal appear in this world. Go to hell with me. I'll wait for you in front of the Yellow Springs. Carpenter, whose thoughts had been completely guessed, wasn't furious, but he was still furious. Good, very good. I didn't want to do this to my future ally, but now you can just wait for your parents to come here as guests. Byakuya's expression changed. He tried to remain calm, but he couldn't help but feel anxious. After Carpenter said those words, he suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. A bad premonition instantly surged in his heart. Carpenter shifted his gaze towards the room where Guanshan and the others were in. Immediately, he heard a crisp kacha sound. It was as if something had broken. What? The illusory space created by Carpenter cracked for the first time. Damn it, this incompetent grade guy is actually a space type or a rule type. Carpenter felt like his body was being torn apart. He panicked and tried to create a new space to remedy the situation. However, he saw Guanshan holding a crowbar in his hand and forcibly prying open the space he had sealed. It was unstoppable. Crack! An even clearer sound rang out. The entire space was completely torn apart. The overlapping illusory space slid to the sides. Guanshan's group and Lu Mingyi, who were originally in the same room, but in different spaces, were now in 2 separate rooms. The door that connected the 2 rooms was opened by the crowbar. This is definitely a rule type. That crowbar, could it be a spiritual item? But why is there no reaction from it? Carpenter was extremely flustered. He ignored Byakuya and immediately began to control the space. On the other side, Byakuya faintly heard the cracking sound. His heart moved. Could it be the Taiyan formation is finally coming to save us? He was delighted and couldn't help but guess. Could it be an A-grade transmigrator that can restrain space types? Isn't this too much of fuss? But considering the uniqueness of the room, it doesn't seem impossible. Byakuya couldn't help but feel nervous and excited. This was the first time he saw Grade a big shot. P.S. Thanks to Wu A.M. Heaven, Leisure Cloud, Smiling Dust, and Hidden Tears for their tips. Chapter 132. Dad, how are you? How did you suddenly age so much? Lu Qiuqiu looked at Lu Mingyi, who had aged dozens of years overnight and looked extremely haggard. Tears welled up in her eyes. Lu Mingyi looked at the people who broke through the wall and was stunned. It took him a long time to recover. Trembling, he said, Qiuqiu, why are you here? Is it that damn guy who did this? And you guys are? That's right. From Guanshan's point of view, they were opening the door. But in fact, from Lu Mingyi's point of view, they had directly pried a big hole in the wall. Then they swaggered in from the other side of the wall. There's no time to explain. You just need to know that we're here to save you. As Guanshan spoke, he picked up the crowbar and walked toward the door of the room again. Since the rooms were connected, Lu Mingyi didn't show any joy when he heard that. Instead, he panicked and said, Hurry up and leave. This place. Although the scene just now was very domineering, in Lu Mingyi's eyes, this was basically walking into a trap. Guanshan looked at the blood and turned his head. The flow of time here is different, right? Cough, cough. Lu Mingyi choked and coughed twice. He said in surprise, How did you know? Judging from their basically unchanged appearance, they probably hadn't stayed in this godforsaken place for a long time. In order to threaten him to tell the origin of the Xidagarba statue and how to use it, the mysterious voice had directly adjusted the flow of time in this room to 1,000 times. In just one night, Lu Mingyi had become an old man. Originally, Lu Qiuqiu said that the strong middle-aged man who stayed up late every night, even though he was almost 50 years old and still had normal physical examinations, had suddenly become an old man with one leg in the coffin. Lu Mingyi was just an ordinary person. He was almost scared out of his wits. The older he got, the more he cherished his life. Moreover, he still had a daughter to raise, so he immediately confessed everything. Then why was he still locked up here? Because he didn't know anything at all. Xidagarba seemed to have been bought from an antique market. As for how to use it, he had always worshipped and burned incense like ordinary Buddha statues. Those patients who still came to him for treatment would feel clear-headed and open-minded after staying in his study for a while. How could they know how to use it? In the end, Lu Mingyi trembled as he recounted everything that had happened. After an unknown amount of time, what he received was not freedom. Instead, the mysterious voice angrily threatened him for the second time, demanding that he reveal the real method. Otherwise, he would bring his daughter in as well. Lu Mingyi was in despair. He felt that he had been wronged. He had clearly told the truth, but this lunatic insisted that he was lying. What else could he do? This was a blatant lie. Perhaps the other party didn't even want to know the answer, and just wanted to torture him. In other words, he could only wait for death. But in reality, Carpenter was furious. He felt that Lu Mingyi had tricked him because he realized that it was useless after trying it out. Being unable to use the Xidagarba statue after obtaining it was undoubtedly the most painful thing for Carpenter. That was why he had planned to capture Lu Qiuqiu and force Lu Mingyi to do the same. As for the few people from the Tan formation who had followed him, he didn't care at all. As long as there were no psychics targeting his ability, it wouldn't be a problem. As far as he knew, such a person wasn't in Hangzhou. He had done a detailed investigation before taking action. It should have been like this. How do you know? Guanshan lifted his feet. The water had completely reached his knees. It felt very wet and uncomfortable. He smacked his feet and said with a smile, Because the water level is different. Originally, the fact that the simulator had changed his perception should have been a very scary thing. But now, he felt that it wasn't that bad. The place where the simulator changed his perception was often a warning of danger. For example, in the restaurant, the meat he saw had turned into a rotten, unknown substance. In fact, that meat was indeed Fong Minmin's parasitic method. If he had eaten it, he probably wouldn't have had anything to do with it. It was the same now. This was blood that others couldn't see. Water level. Lu Mingyi looked confused. He looked around and didn't see the existence of water. Lu Qiuqiu explained Guanshan's illness in a low voice. No, his ability. Guanshan didn't expect them to understand him. He muttered to himself, the water level on both sides will be the same, which means that after the rooms are connected, they will become one object. And a bigger space can't support a faster flow of time. There is a balance between the two, and that psychic's control of the flow of time is limited. Maybe it can be understood that the total amount of water he has is fixed and must be reasonably distributed. Otherwise, he could have made the flow of time on our side as fast as here from the beginning. Does that mean that more of the water is actually in this room? He must adjust the flow of water to adjust the flow of time. In other words, as long as the space continues to expand, the flow of time will be distributed. Then, since the total amount is limited, the number of rooms is also limited. When the door of the last room is opened, will it be the real place where the room is? Kacha! Guanshan Pride opened the door of the room. The room outside the door was no longer Lu Mingyi's study room. It was an unfamiliar dark room. Blood spread everywhere. In this room, there were more than 3 corpses. No, they weren't corpses because they were standing up. Carpenter's voice sounded again. He shouted in a low voice, "Kill them, and I'll give you freedom." The information of these corpses appeared in front of Guanshan's eyes. Undead LV 14, HP 7,000. Description: these skeletons have been imprisoned here for 50 years. They have lost their will long ago. Only hunger and madness are left. These people should be the other people who were captured by the room. They were either dead or had become Carpenter's accomplices. Guanshan looked at the 4 corpses that were above LV 10. He took a deep breath. No wonder they didn't return. The people in front have become accomplices. How can they return, considering the safety of the others? Guanshan took out the demon's sword and shouted, "Get down." He then took out a shot grenade and threw it out. Lu Mingyi did not react fast enough. However, it was fine as long as the logistics team reacted fast enough. The logistics team members were well trained. They immediately dragged the 2 of them to another room and pressed them on the ground. Boom! Whoa! The grenade exploded in the middle of the corpses. The explosion was accompanied by a strong light in the narrow space. The explosion was extremely powerful. Even the few people in the other room felt their heads buzzing, not to mention the monsters. One of the more fragile ones fell apart and contributed 6,000 EXP to Guanshan. The room was filled with dust and vision was blocked. They could only see a blood-red arc. Guanshan's figure rushed out of the dust and appeared in front of one of the corpses. P.S. Thanks to the cool how and starry sky eyes for the tip. Chapter 133. Swoosh! The patterns on the demon's sword glowed with a bloody light. In this dark and chaotic room, it was as eye-catching as a gigantic firefly. The corpses that struggled to stand up groaned in pain. Their eyes were attracted by the light, but they could not focus because of the strong light. They could only see a blurry image. Kill them while they are weak. This was Guanshan's creed ever since he obtained the simulator. Therefore, he dashed to one of the corpses as fast as he could and fixed it on the wall with 1 foot. He then stabbed the demon's sword into its eye socket. These corpses were like mummies. There were still shriveled eyeballs in their eye sockets. When Guanshan slashed down with his knife, he felt as if he had burst a small balloon with a thicker skin. Then, he felt as if he had poked into the floor. The feeling of the tip of the knife was different from that of tenacity, water, and then hardness. However, it was as if there was no water at all. Ugh! The corpse was still struggling to reach out its hand. The arm was made of green skin and purplish-green nails. It was covered with the same white mold that had been left behind by the blood. It was still trying to scratch Guanshan's leg. Guanshan decisively spun the blade in his hand and squeezed the juice out of this undying fellow. Experience plus 5,000. The corpse was completely dead. The 3 corpses next to it gradually regained consciousness. Their lifeless eyes were filled with madness. Guanshan was about to go forward when he saw one of the corpses suddenly lie down and let out a strange cry. Then, its body gradually became extremely huge. It was only as tall as a person. After it grew bigger, it took up almost half of the room's volume. Moreover, it was limited by the height of the room. However, that did not stop it from slamming its palm down on Guanshan and opening its mouth to bite him. WDNMD. Guanshan cursed in his heart. The demon's sword in his hand suddenly became like a toothpick. The pressure of the giant creature in this narrow space made him break out in cold sweat. He immediately rolled to the side to dodge the attack. The giant corpse's palm slammed into the wall. At the same time, he took the opportunity to turn around and slashed at the corpse's wrist. Swish-ka! The skin and flesh were cut open by the blade, but the bones were only cut halfway before they got stuck. This bone was too big. With the same degree of toughness, an ordinary person could be directly cut into two by the demon blade. However, with the sharpness of the demon blade, this was the limit of the first strike. The knife was stuck. Guanshan knew something was wrong. Sure enough, when he turned his head, he saw that the skull of the giant skeleton was already in front of him. He quickly pulled the knife out. However, the skeleton did not hesitate in the slightest. It pushed its wrist forward and used its broken wrist to clamp the demonic blade once again. F***CK. Guanshan's pupils constricted. Making a prompt decision, he decided not to pull. He kept the knife in his backpack and took out the crowbar to block in front of him. After this series of actions, Guanshan no longer had any room to dodge the incoming bloody mouth. Although he used the crowbar to prevent the mouth from closing, Guanshan was still forced back by the force of the impact. The blood in the room surged and splashed. Bang! Guanshan slammed into the corner of the wall. He felt that his internal organs were about to be shaken out. 1200. His HP bar instantly dropped by 1/6. Guanshan gritted his teeth and used his hand to support the crowbar with difficulty. He did not let the giant skeleton close its mouth. I miscalculated. I forgot that the monsters here are actually all psychics. The people trapped here were not only ordinary people, but also psychics. Even if they were old, they would still be psychics. At most, their body functions would deteriorate and their abilities would weaken. However, their abilities would still be what they were. At their peak, they could even be a dungeon boss. This also reflected how strong the ability of the room was. Just as Guanshan thought of this, he looked over the shoulder of the giant skeleton and saw the other two skeletons. One transformed into a dark cloud formed by buzzing flies, while the other had white mold growing crazily on its body and pierced into the blood. It seemed to have triggered the mold spores in the blood, causing them to erupt in a large area. They drilled out from every corner of the room. When the dark clouds dispersed, they occupied the other half of the room. There seemed to be some mutated sharp mouth parts everywhere. Guanshan could feel them biting on his bare skin, causing him to lose HP with -1, -1, -1, -1, -1, -1. Although the number was small, the frequency was really high. In addition, the mutated mold grew in the blood and climbed up along Guanshan's ankles like vines. It even stretched out its own branches and tried to pierce his skin. It made his scalp tingle. Guanshan did not dare to be careless. With a low roar, the veins on his hands bulged. Relying on his own strength, he forcefully pushed the giant zombie away for a short distance. Then, he repeated the same trick and rolled to the side again. Then, a grayish-white skull appeared in his hand. He squeezed it hard. The skeleton immediately turned into fine powder and drifted in the air, scattering on the bloody water. Then, it turned black and condensed into a shadow. This darkness rolled and surged, and terrifying bubbles appeared, whistling as they swept towards the large skeleton. Grayish-white skeleton. It was a tool that could summon the boss, Anthrax, to the human world again. It was time to use magic to defeat magic. Although it was only 20 seconds as a boss, 20 seconds was more than enough to kill an elite monster. The black shadows were like giant pythons that coiled around the giant corpse. Countless shadows turned into a rain of sharp swords that fell from the sky, causing the giant corpse to howl in pain. However, it was useless. The giant corpse wanted to hit the shadows, but they often hit its own body. After Guanshan got rid of the zombie's control, he took out the devil sword again and ran towards the mutant who controlled the mold. He immediately shouted, "Logistics team, what's wrong with these mutants?" The logistics team raised their heads slightly and shouted, "Controlling plants, turning into mist and gigantification." They are all missing arcanists who have been recorded for more than 50 years. Guanshan's eyes lit up as he grasped the key words. Plants? That's definitely a weak fire. His other hand raised the Glock 17 that he hadn't used for a long time. He raised the muzzle and pointed it at the corpse that was completely covered in mold. Bang! Sparks flew as the bullets landed on the mold. The incendiary bomb exploded, igniting a raging fire that spread to the wild mold on the bloodwater. The entire room was suddenly engulfed in a sea of fire. The corpse in the mold had already become a torch, screaming miserably. It was still unwilling to give up and commanded the molds to entangle Guanshan. Along with the mold, the flies also suffered. Some of them were also affected, turned into fuel, and burned to ashes. Under such a fierce fire, the flies gathered again and turned back into human form. Half of their arms were burned off. They rushed towards Guanshan with a hideous and painful expression. Guanshan suddenly shouted and raised the devil's sword. "Trip it!" Shuman Lin, who hadn't appeared, immediately stretched out her leg and tripped the corpse. With a plop, the corpse fell to the ground. Guanshan got rid of the mold, took 2 steps forward, and beheaded the corpse with 1 slash. The mold corpse finally turned into a charred skeleton and froze on the spot. The shadow also strangled the gigantic corpse. Experience plus 6,000. Experience plus 7,000. Experience plus 6,000. LV. 14 LV. 15. Current experience. 149 626 0000. Level up. PS1. Thank you 310406. Weaves with Carps. Reader 1413686948581052416. Zhang Xiaoman 123 for their tips. PS2. I almost fell asleep, but luckily I didn't. So I'll put a bowl here, waiting for a fated person to vote. Chapter 134. Level 15. Guanshan heaved a sigh of relief, put away the demon blade, and then patted off the mutated mold on his leg. Following the death of its owner, these molds also lost their vitality. They withered and shattered into dregs at the slightest touch, falling into the bloody water. However, Guanshan could still feel the tightening of the mold on his leg. He looked down and saw that his calf was full of bloody marks, as if it had been bitten by a row of fine teeth. His pants and the flesh around it had become minced meat. Although the wounds were quickly disappearing as if they were refreshed, Howren could still feel them in the process. Fortunately, the mold was thin and long like thorns. Otherwise, he would not be able to keep his pants. "Thank you for your help." Guanshan thanked Shuman Lin telepathically through the earpiece because he could not see where the ladder was. It would be silly to just call out to her. Other things aside, the earpiece was amazing. It had refreshed his understanding of the world of adepts. Shuman Lin's ability was also very interesting. It allowed him to ignore a living person in front of him. However, from another perspective, not having a sense of presence did sound a little bad. Guanshan looked around, but in fact, Shuman Lin was already squatting in the corner, covering her face with both hands. She wanted to cry, but had no tears. After hearing Guanshan's thanks, Shuman Lin said, "You're welcome. It's what I should do." Sob, sob, sob. Why did she subconsciously stretch out her leg when she heard the word trip? Could it be that she had tripped too many people and it had become a conditioned reflex? No, that's impossible. Shuman Lin shook her head desperately. She pinched her ears guiltily and muttered, I didn't use the mission to trip them. Those annoying guys stepped on my foot. I didn't blame them. It's their own bad luck that they fell." At this moment, Guanshan praised him politely. "You're flattering me. That kick just now was really steady and accurate, and the timing was perfect. I almost suspected that you practiced it in private." He sighed. "It's really a waste of talent for you not to join the first squad." Shuman Lin, she didn't seem to be very happy. The confused Guanshan did not realize that a small action had greatly hurt the feelings of a colleague. He rubbed the remaining mold on his fingers. The seemingly weak, white fungus was actually filled with tiny teeth. It was easy to imagine how painful it would be for the recipient if it were to be tightened. But unfortunately, Guan Shan did not feel any pain in the simulated state. The mechanism of this mold was purely flirting with the blind. It was a waste of effort. Guan Shan thought about it carefully and felt a little scared. Actually, it's still very scary. If I had killed it a little later, wouldn't I have to run around naked? The mental damage is very strong. That being said, this thing actually caused a lot of damage. Previously, he had only lost 1200 HP from the giant skeleton slap. The mold and the blood-sucking flies had used their numbers to win, and in that short period of time, he had unknowingly worn down half of his HP. Sure enough, it was more painful to cut flesh with a soft knife. Fortunately, leveling up has restored my HP, saving me the time of standing on the spot to recover my HP. The clothes are also repaired. Guan Shan walked to the door on the other side. At this time, the logistics team had helped the frightened father and daughter of the Liu family up. In Guan Shan's view, they had directly fallen into a pool of blood just now. Now, they looked like they had just been fished out of a tomato pod. The color was exceptionally festive. Liu Qiuqiu looked at Guan Shan with eyes full of shock, as if she was seeing him for the first time. In these few short minutes, although she was afraid, she could not help but secretly open her eyes to take a look. She was deeply shocked by what she saw. She finally understood how Guan Shan was able to demolish that building. Liu Qiuqiu felt like she was watching a blockbuster with special effects, and Guan Shan was the absolute protagonist of this film. Of course, this film should not be Superman, but Deadpool, so the scene was slightly unsuitable for children. Lu Mingyi trembled. Just now. From their point of view, although the humanoid creatures did not look like corpses, they were old beyond recognition. Even so, they still had to kill others in order to survive. Their murky eyes were filled with murderous glints. Obviously, they had lost themselves over a long period of time and became crazy. Guan Shan took out his crowbar again and said, "They're the ability users who were trapped here before. Maybe the room wants to get something from them. Just like you and the detective, weren't you also trapped here because of a statue? If we didn't come to save you, maybe many years later, you would also become them." So Byakuya was also caught by him and disappeared? Lu Mingyi was stunned and smiled bitterly. The statue has been taken away by him. I also told him how to use it, but he still didn't let me go and said that I was lying. There was such a thing? Although only half of the statue was left, Lu Mingyi had used it for so many years, so it must be effective. Guan Shan touched his chin. He's not going to let you go, is he? He raised his head and shouted to the ceiling. Then there is only one way left. Let's come to you. The room, who was extremely arrogant before, was silent at this moment. Guan Shan raised his eyebrows. Why aren't you talking? Let me guess. After you saw me kill these 3 C-class ability users, were you frightened, confused, or scared? It doesn't matter. We will see you soon. At that time, I will also kill you like this. As the saying goes, as long as your voice is louder than a ghost and your momentum is stronger than a ghost, you will not be afraid of horror games. The point was that the ghost really did not make sound. Guan Shan became bolder. Expensive, 20 yuan, 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 picked up the crowbar, walked to the side of the door, and pried open the door of the room. Outside the door was an empty room, and the blood water level was divided again. He turned back and said seriously, "Let's go, Victoria, and Police ABC, and, well, Mr. Pavlo." Guan Shan was even in the mood to joke, calling them according to the role given by the simulator. However, Liu Qiuqiu showed a surprised expression. "How do you know my English name is Victoria?" Guan Shan, "No, I don't know." Probably only the simulator knew. Liu Qiuqiu became more and more curious. "Is this also your ability? You saw some information that you didn't know before, so you immediately know that the flow of time here is different?" Guan Shan had a headache. He felt that Dr. Liu seemed to be studying him as a special case, so he said vaguely, "Kind of." Liu Qiuqiu asked again, "Don't you know my father?" Guanshan said casually. I know him. I just met him today. He is a famous psychiatrist at Sacred Hospital. He really did not remember. Lu Qiuqiu felt more and more strange in her heart. She took 2 steps back and asked Lu Mingyi softly, Dad, what about you? Have you ever seen him? Lu Mingyi frowned and shook his head. Qiuqiu, why are you asking this? Do you really think your father is a national celebrity? He doesn't even know me. As a psychiatrist, how can I not see people who are not my patients? Why are you so rude? P.S. Thank you. So expensive 20 yuan, 1,000-year-old chinchilla. Hua yuan chun. Great old 1A's reward. Chapter 135. Not a patient. Lu Qiuqiu was stunned. She felt that something was wrong. Guanshan might not remember what happened at that time because of his illness. He didn't even remember Sacred Hospital, so it was normal that he didn't remember who the attending doctor was. But Lu Mingyi shouldn't have forgotten his own patient. Although there was a time difference of 6 years, Lu Qiuqiu had found a photo of Guanshan at that time in the medical records. In terms of appearance, there was not much difference. It was just that he was a little more mature now. However, this wasn't necessarily the case. Lu Mingyi had treated countless patients. It wasn't impossible for him to forget. Moreover, Lu Mingyi had aged dozens of years overnight because of that psychic. It wasn't impossible for his memory to suddenly deteriorate. Lu Qiuqiu thought about it and coughed twice. She reminded him tactfully. Ahem, his name is Guanshan. Guanshan, the Guanshan who traveled thousands of miles to go to war. Lu Mingyi looked at her and waited for a while. Seeing that she didn't move, he frowned and asked, And then, aren't you going to introduce the others? Lu Qiuqiu was speechless. Did he think that she was introducing people one by one? Lu Qiuqiu opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but she was afraid that Lu Mingyi would scold her for being rude again. So, she could only continue to introduce the others. Although in fact, she didn't know these people. She was just introduced to them, so she just repeated their words. She was still quite afraid when her old man became serious. After all, she had been studying medicine under Lu Mingyi's strict requirements since she was a child. The days of memorizing books every day were very painful. Now that she thought about it, she was much happier in school than at home. At least before university, there were only a few books to memorize in school. But at home, there were a few shelves of books to memorize. Thanks to her devilish childhood, she had skipped the only part of her life where she could be happy. Sob, sob, sob. Therefore, when Lu Mingyi put on a stern face, Lu Qiuqiu basically kept quiet. After Lu Qiuqiu finished the introduction, she confirmed that Lu Mingyi had no recollection of the name Guanshan. The question mark in her heart grew bigger and bigger. There were only 2 possibilities. Either the medical record in her hands was fake, or someone had tampered with the patient's memory. Originally, Lu Qiuqiu thought that the latter was a fantasy, but now she was in a space created by an ability user. The possibility of the latter was much higher. Could it be that, at that time, there was another paranormal who erased everyone's memories and only left out the medical records that had been sealed in the archives for 6 years? While Lu Qiuqiu was deep in thought, Guanshan, who had just opened the 4th door, met another prisoner in another room. But this time, the prisoner was still rational. Please kill me. The prisoner put his hands together and begged Guanshan. In Guanshan's eyes, although the prisoner in front of him was as ferocious as the corpses, his hands and feet were like those of a beast. His eyes were closed. He was wearing a tattered kasaya, but his hair was as messy as weeds on his head. In his hand was a string of Buddhist prayer beads that had long decayed. When he touched the beads, blurry golden engravings could be seen on them. Of course, what attracted Guanshan's attention the most was the monk's knife under the kasaya beside him. The symbol above his head was not a monster, but an NPC. You have met an NPC. Monk with a blade. Elven 19. Health points, 30,000. Description. A monk who has been trapped here for 30 years has not lost his will. It seems that he has a wish that could not be fulfilled. Looking at this description, Guanshan exclaimed that he had lived long enough to see this. After playing the simulator for so long, there was finally an NPC that looked like he could give out missions. Although there was no exclamation mark above the NPC's head, Guanshan could already feel the presence of a mission. Okay, how could there be a proper mission in a horror game? But it was true that this NPC could be communicated with. Speaking of which, this master's level seems to be the highest I've seen so far, right? Guanshan thought about it. The boss of this dungeon was only level 17 with 40,000 health points. The one in front of him was level 19 with 30,000 health points. His attack power was probably unimaginably high. From another perspective, to be trapped here for 30 years and still have 30,000 health points without losing his mind, that was a very scary thing. In any case, it was better to be careful. Guanshan first confirmed with Shuman Lin that the person in front of him was also a monk in their eyes, but he was more normal and even looked kind. Guanshan walked forward, bent slightly, raised his crowbar, and asked, "Master, are you also trapped here? I have a way to get out. Do you want to come with me?" The blade-wielding monk shook his head. "No, I'm already at the end of my rope. This body is only maintained by that evil creature. The only thing that keeps me going is a wisp of my will. Now that 30 years have passed, I know that the outside world has changed. When I saw how unfamiliar your clothes are, I no longer have the ability to go out, and there is no point in going out." The blade-wielding monk handed the Buddha beads in his hand to Guanshan and said gently, "This string of Buddha beads was given to me by my master, Liao Yi, when I received my precepts. It has the effect of nourishing qi and spirit. Now that you have removed the karma on me, this string of Buddha beads is yours. If you meet someone who recognizes this item in the future, please tell them that Qingyi is dead and has no more worries." Although his voice was extremely hoarse and terrifying in Guanshan's ears, Guanshan could still hear a hint of gentleness in his voice. It was clear that the master's Buddhist teachings were indeed profound. This room was probably a little strange. If one was locked in here for too long, they would become neither human nor ghost like the three superpowered people from before. However, this master Qingyi was able to stay awake. It was indeed different. Guanshan took it, and the Buddha beads attributes immediately appeared. It turned out to be an item. Blade-wielding monk's Buddha beads. Effect. For every Buddhist-related item, its effect will increase by an additional 5%. Stackable. When HP reaches 0, there's a chance to avoid death and recover 1% of HP. Description: the heirloom of Green Moss Temple, the symbol of the abbot. Guanshan's pupils constricted and he was shocked. Good heavens, so this is the effect of nourishing qi and spirit. Putting aside the terrifying effect of collecting the Ksitigarbha statue, just the effect of avoiding death was already the most powerful item he had at the moment. He had only spoken a few words, and he had already given such an important item to Guanshan. It seemed that he was really at his wit's end. Guanshan hurriedly said, "Since it is the master's last wish, I will definitely help to complete it. However, I have some questions. I wonder if the master can answer them." Qingyi nodded, and Guanshan asked about the Ksitigarbha statue. Qingyi glanced at Guanshan and said, "This is indeed a Buddhist heirloom. One of them. However, more than half of it was lost during the turmoil. Nowadays, very few people can find a complete one. This evil creature just wants to ask me about the whereabouts and how to use this item. Unfortunately, I don't know either." Guanshan nodded and asked about Green Moss Temple and superpowered people. However, because Qingyi was from a different era, he could not talk about these things. In the end, he could only say goodbye with regret. Guanshan raised his hand and slashed down, giving Qingyi a quick death. It was not that he was heartless, but towards the end of the conversation, a strange red warning appeared above Qingyi's head. It seemed that Qingyi could not hold on any longer. Guanshan then opened the door and saw a middle-aged man being held hostage by the bloody man. The bloody man sneered, "I didn't expect you to have the ability to divide space. However, this is the end. This person is also your target, right? Detective Byakuya, your senior. How is it?" He killed Qingyi without hesitation. "Are you afraid that he will kill you too? Why don't we cooperate?" Byakuya heard this, and his eyes immediately lit up. He shouted at Guanshan, "Good job. Don't worry about me. Kill him. PS1. Thank you to Li Li in the fog, Rain in deep winter, and Ling Huazong for your tips. PS2. Recently, my mother was discharged from the hospital after surgery, and I accompanied her. Yesterday, she was a little dizzy after staying in the air-conditioned room for too long. These 2 days, I have only updated once. Tomorrow, I will resume with 2 updates. Chapter 136. Carpenter's original intention was to instigate Byakuya to work with him to find the other half of the Xitigarbha statue. He deliberately blocked out the sound in the room and reversed the sequence of the scene in front of Byakuya. It looked like Guanshan had used flowery words to gain Qingyi's trust in order to snatch the prayer beads. Then, he beheaded Qingyi without hesitation. Carpenter had once coveted the prayer beads, but Qingyi's martial prowess wasn't something he could contend against. Qingyi's will was as firm as a rock, so he could only use the room to trap him and wait for him to die naturally. He used this opportunity to tell White Knight that the person who broke into the room was not a savior, but just another villain who wanted to take advantage of the situation. The reason why he spared Lu Mingyi's life was that, like White Knight, he wanted to get information from him. Carpenter patiently said, "After he kills me, the next one to die will be you. You'll just create an even more evil person. Why don't you cooperate with me and kill him together? That way, you'll have a chance to wait for a better candidate, right?" He didn't expect Byakuya to not fall for it. Not only did he not fall for it, he even looked like he was ready to accept his death. Even if Carpenter considered himself a madman, he couldn't understand what was going on in Byakuya's head. Why was there someone who wasn't afraid of death? Why did he want to die? Just so that the so-called justice could be upheld and carried out? Carpenter's face turned sinister. "Aren't you afraid of creating an even more evil person than me? Didn't you see how cruel he was? That monk, those 3 pitiful people, how did he treat them?" After killing the monsters, Guanshan naturally had to pick up the loot. However, his backpack was full, and some of the items generated by the simulator might be lost. Therefore, he thought a way to cheat. That was to ask Lin Schumann what she had actually gotten after picking it up. If it was generated by the monsters, then he could give it to Schumann Lin for safekeeping. This way, he could keep it. But this way, it would be like a bug, and he might not be able to put it in his backpack again. However, in order to maximize the benefits, this was the only way. Therefore, the others could see that after Guanshan killed the man, he continued to whip the corpse and took away all the useful things on the man's body. It was literally Guan Bapi. The scene was so brutal that the men fell silent and the women shed tears. Unfortunately, White Knight didn't care. Pity my ass. They're just puppets controlled by you. If they had a consciousness, they would definitely want you dead. White Knight laughed arrogantly. "You're crazy. You're so panicked that you want to join forces with me. Do you think I'll believe your words? As long as you die, this space will disappear, and all the corpses will appear in the corresponding rooms. The Taiyan formation will definitely take action. When the time comes, no one will be able to escape from here. A superpower user who can be listed on the victim list will receive a different level of attention compared to ordinary small fries. You should feel honored." Carpenter was exasperated. "You? Fine. Do you really think you have nothing to fear? Then all of you can die together. I can find other people for clues, but you will pay the price for your arrogance." Just like before, the bloody man turned into a bubble and disappeared. White Knight shrugged and grinned at Guanshan and the others. "He's anxious." Bang, bang, bang. The surrounding space was instantly sealed, including the door that Guanshan had pried open. It was also filled with bricks. There was no door in this room. At the same time, a large amount of blood gushed out from the wall like a waterfall. This meant that the flow of time in this place was increasing rapidly. Lu Qiuqiu raised her hand in horror and suddenly found that her originally white and tender hand had gradually become dry and tight. Schumann Lin had a similar reaction, but she was slightly calmer and didn't continue to panic. As for the 3 strong men from the logistics team, they had already expected this to happen, so they remained silent and motionless. Guanshan looked at White Knight speechlessly. "So this is the genius detective that I've only heard of but never seen in person? I don't know if it's good to say that he's fearless or that his brain is wired. Although that boss will definitely use a big move, he actually chose to provoke the other party when his life is in danger. It has to be said that he has a lot of personality. In Guan Shan's view, the person in front of him was a middle-aged NPC. White Knight, LV, 21, HB, 1000 description, a mysterious detective who has been trapped here for a month. His personality is perverse, but he extremely advocates justice. Whoa, I just finished talking about the level of the monk, and now there's a higher one. Judging from his behavior and level, this White Knight is definitely a psychic and doesn't seem to belong to the Tan formation. But isn't this brutal skin a little too weak? His HP at LV 21 is the same as Guan Shan before he broke through to LV 10. How strong is his ability? But even if it's strong, it's useless. I'm still trapped here and can't get out. Guan Shan stepped forward, reached out his hand, and briefly introduced himself. White Knight shook his hand up and down vigorously, clicking his tongue in wonder. He looked at him as if he saw a rare treasure. To be able to make the room so flustered, I thought it would be a few space-related big shots from the Tan formation. I didn't expect it to be a reporter from Jiangsai newspaper. The 3 cases I left behind before only half of the investigation were investigated. Have you finished investigating them? Yes, that's right. White Knight suddenly became excited. Are you interested in joining my detective agency? What's that? No. Now is not the time to talk about this. Guan Shan pulled his hand out and sighed helplessly. My ability needs the existence of the door to be effective. Now this space is completely sealed. He didn't continue, but everyone understood what he was trying to say. What he meant was that they could only wait for death. The room they were in now was a completely sealed secret room. Originally, Guan Shan thought that the boss body should be at the end of the room, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. White Knight calmed down in a second and thought. So that's how it is. The room purposely brought me to this room to deal with your ability. It seems that he's not stupid. Guan Shan was about to speak when White Knight continued. But all rooms are based on reality. Since the room can replicate this room, it means that he has been here before. If he can come in, he can definitely come out. The door doesn't have to be a passage. It can also be a switch. Guan Shan was dumbfounded as he looked at White Knight muttering to himself. He walked around the room, then squatted next to the wall and touched it. Looks like it's here. Try to pry it open. White Knight called for the rest of the people to come over and help. He pressed down on the 12 bricks on the wall, then turned his head to Guan Shan and said, "Okay, you can pry it open. I've solved the puzzle." He quickly explained, "This should be a trap wall, but under the influence of the room, even if I could decipher the trap, I won't be able to open this wall. But since you can open all the doors, then this wall should be effective as well." Guan Shan walked over and thought to himself, "How can this ability of yours be solved? You can crack any mechanism with just one look. It should be called a game cheat. P.S. Thanks to Meteor Shadow and Arthas for the tips." Chapter 137. Voila! Guan Shan inserted the crowbar into the gap in the wall and pulled it upwards. Sure enough, the sound of the wall loosening could be heard. A layer of dust fell from above and landed on Guan Shan and the others. However, no one cared about their image at this moment. Time was quickly passing in the room. If they were delayed for even a second, they would age by a few months. Compared to that, this layer of dust was the most troublesome thing for them. It obstructed their vision. Guan Shan continued to pry, and the wall opened. Everyone looked up in surprise. In the darkness, the last door was right in front of them. Or rather, it was just a door-shaped white block that was filled with bright white light. The blood water that was almost as tall as a person flowed into this dark space. It could be seen that this space also had a physical body. When the blood water hit the air wall, it was immediately bounced back and gradually filled up this space. That's right. After the blood water flowed into this space, not only did it not decrease, it even increased. It could be seen that Carpenter really wanted them dead. In the middle of the blood water, there was no longer a person covered in blood. Instead, it was a young man in his 20s. He had black hair and blue eyes. There was also an invisible wall around him, isolating him from the bloody water. It was obvious that this was Carpenter's real appearance. However, at this moment, everyone was too panicked to care about the real mastermind behind this. Voila! The blood water in front of and behind them was like a flood, rushing towards everyone and forming a whirlpool. Guanshan's heart jumped. He realized that everyone's appearance was rapidly aging. The speed was more than 3 times faster than before. If this continued, the normal people in the logistics team and the father and daughter of the Liu family would really die here. Especially Liu Mingyi, who had been accelerated once and had aged by several decades. He had completely lost his ability to move. His hair was white, and his face was covered in wrinkles and age spots. His consciousness had become dizzy, and his hands and legs were weak. He almost fell to the ground. Lu Qiuqiu had no choice but to support him. She hurriedly said, "Dad, hang in there. We'll be out soon. Hang in there." The 3 logistics team members took out a syringe and injected it into the father and daughter of the Liu family. Then, they passed one syringe to Guanshan. Bai found it difficult to breathe due to his old age, but he still asked curiously, "What is this? The secret weapon of the Taiyan formation?" The logistics team explained the weakened version of the active agent can enhance the activity of the cells, which happens to have the function of inhibiting aging. Bai was filled with respect and patted the shoulder of the person who spoke. Of these 3 potions that could potentially save their lives, 2 were given to ordinary people, and 1 was given to Guanshan, who was the strongest in combat, without any hesitation. These were the logistics members of the Taiyan formation. This was completely in line with the justice he pursued. Bai couldn't help but be deeply moved. He said, "If you die, I will definitely put your names in my detective society." The 3 members of the logistics team didn't think that this promise was a joke. Instead, they looked at each other and grinned. One of them joked, "What if we live?" Bai said solemnly, "Then I will have to beg you to put your names in my detective society." The logistics team was happy. They didn't really expect to be begged by a psychic. Or rather, they actually thought that they were going to die. It was already a good way to die, to be begged by a psychic before death. Guanshan didn't take the weakened version of the active agent. Instead, he raised his head and looked at his HP bar. It didn't decrease. From the very beginning, he noticed that although he was stepping in blood, his HP bar wasn't affected. During the process of Lu Qiuqiu's operation, it was obvious that she was gradually aging. Her HP bar was now less than 1/3. In other words, the decrease in lifespan should mean the decrease in HP. However, Guanshan's HP bar didn't change. At the same time, he didn't feel any signs of aging. He didn't even take a breath. Guanshan thought of this and returned the agent in his hand. He said, "I don't need it." The logistics team was stunned. At this time, Carpenter raised his head and walked to the side. The blood parted as he pointed at the door of light. "I'll give you all a chance. I don't want to waste my breath. Leave White Knight here, and the rest of you can leave. This is the exit." Lu Qiuqiu had already turned into a little old lady. She said angrily, "You think it's the exit just because you say so? What if it's a trap? Who would believe you?" Guanshan looked at the door. It showed the word exit. He said in a low voice, "That is indeed the exit." Lu Qiuqiu, arrogantly took a step forward. "Since it's the exit, you can leave. I will stay. If we don't leave, we will all be trapped here. It's better to leave me here in exchange for your lives." Lu Qiuqiu and the others were stunned. They hesitated. This won't do." Bai turned around and looked at them. He smiled. "Why not? Even ordinary people know how to protect the weak. As an Esper, I should protect ordinary people who understand this principle." When everyone heard this, they were all moved. However, Guanshan nodded. He looked at Carpenter and said, "Okay, but I will only leave after they leave. I don't want you to play any tricks." Carpenter laughed and pointed at Guanshan. He said to Bai, "See what I said? This is just a hypocritical villain. He doesn't care about your life or death. What you're about to release is a guy who's more evil and destructive than me. Do you think he'll kill the rest of the people after he gets out to cover up such a stain on his record in the special security group?" White Knight said calmly, "Even so, It's better than letting a room ghost that can't be captured continue to do evil in China. Carpenter coldly snorted. You're lying to yourself. He turned to the others. You can leave now. Lu Qiuqiu couldn't bear it. The logistics team also had difficult expressions. However, it was undeniable that this was the best solution. They could only walk towards the door under Guan Shan's urging and return to reality. In this space filled with a sea of blood, only Guan Shan, Bai Yi, and Carpenter were left. Guan Shan walked to the door and shook hands with Bai Yi. Goodbye. Bai Yi looked deeply at him and said, I believe in you. I also believe in Xia Lei's vision. Since you were recommended by him, then you must be a good person. Yes, I know. Guan Shan nodded and replied. Bai Yi felt that his mission was over. He was about to withdraw his hand and leave, but he found that Guan Shan was holding his hand tightly. He couldn't move at all. Bai Yi raised his head in confusion. He felt Guan Shan's hands suddenly tighten. Then he felt the world spin, and he was thrown into the door of light. Fuck you! Bai Yi's figure instantly disappeared. His voice of disbelief became more and more distant until it disappeared. Guan Shan clapped his hands in satisfaction and waved towards the door of light. Sorry, although I feel sorry for your sense of justice. I can't end the simulation if I don't kill the boss. PS1. Thank you for the expensive 20 yuan, Songland's glimpse, and I Fanching as a reward. PS2 knock. Ed. Chapter 138. After the Lu father and daughter and the logistics team passed through the light door, Lu Mingyi staggered and fell to the ground. Lu Mingyi fainted directly. Lu Qiuqiu quickly went forward and checked while anxiously looking around. She couldn't help but be stunned. Where is this? In front of them was obviously no longer Lu Mingyi's study, but a construction site. It was still late at night. The construction site was dark, quiet, and empty. There was only a pungent smell of dust and cement. Although the logistics team was also aging due to the room ability, their reaction was not slow. Although their equipment was also aging, it was still custom-made and could still be used. They immediately contacted the Taiyan formation and at the same time obtained a shocking result. This is no longer Hangzhou. We are now at the border of Liaoshan. Lu Qiuqiu was startled, feeling confused and shocked. Liaoshan? Isn't this equivalent to directly crossing half of Huaxia? The distance between Hangzhou and Liaoshan was at least 1,000 kilometers. However, in that strange space, they only spent an hour and walked through 5 rooms. In reality, they had already jumped from Hangzhou to Liaoshan, which was 1,000 kilometers away. Lu Qiuqiu once again experienced the horror of paranormals. It wasn't a cruel thing, but you really found that their ability was indeed beyond your understanding of human beings, and then you realized the gap between the world of these people and you. The logistics team helped Lu Mingyi and Lu Qiuqiu up and comforted them, but don't worry, there will be reinforcements soon. Lu Qiuqiu nodded, but she didn't relax in her heart. Instead, she looked back. Although they came out of the light door, in the real world, there was no back of the door, which meant that it was only a one-way passage opened by Carpenter. Although they came out, Byakuya would continue to be tortured in that terrifying space. Lu Qiuqiu's heart was very heavy, sacrificing one person to save many people. Although objectively she understood that Guan Shan's choice was understandable, as the one who was saved, she couldn't help but feel guilty. At the same time, she couldn't help but have some doubts. Guan Shan was too calm and decisive. F***CK, Uncle Li. A sudden curse interrupted Lu Qiuqiu's train of thought. Lu Qiuqiu quickly looked in the direction of the voice. You! Before she could finish her sentence, she was stunned when she saw the person who suddenly appeared and fell flat on his face. It wasn't Guan Shan as he expected, but Bai Yi. What was going on? How could it be him? Now that he's out, what about Guan Shan? The logistics team was also stunned. After helping Bai Yi up, the first thing this person did was to turn around and scold. Are you even human? I've lived for so long, but I've never been robbed of the opportunity to enforce justice. You're really something. Bai Yi didn't care if they could hear him. He jumped up and down angrily. Damn it, cough cough. Bai Yi probably forgot that he was over 50 years old now. He coughed twice due to overexertion. He put his hands on his waist and took a deep breath. He turned around and borrowed a communication device from the logistics team. With a pained expression, he dialed a number. "Hello, you're not asleep, right?" A thick female voice came from the other side. "De Zhuang, aren't you talking nonsense? If I was asleep, how could I answer your call? Don't call me by my real name." Bai Yi scolded. "I remember that you have a space blaster, right? I have the coordinates here. Hurry up and find someone to save my brother." I remember that you're an only child. Stop talking nonsense. He's my brother now. How dare you? I'm going to kill you." Carpenter watched as Guan Shan teleported Bai Yi out of this space. He was so angry that his eyes turned red. He glared at Guan Shan as he yelled. Anyone in this group could leave, but Bai Yi couldn't. Bai Yi was the only one who could possibly know the whereabouts of the remaining half of the statue. It wasn't easy for Carpenter to copy a room and separate it from reality. He had to obtain the precise coordinates of the room and an anchor point token. However, Bai Yi had installed a mini camera in Lu Mingyi's study. Therefore, it was very troublesome for Carpenter to do this. In the end, he lured Bai Yi into his trap and took down Lu Mingyi and the statue. But now it was all for naught. It was all because of Guan Shan in front of him. Carpenter was about to go crazy. He stacked all the other rooms in this room. The flow of time increased again and again until it reached its limit. The house in front of Guan Shan was immersed in a sea of blood. It was like an abstract picture in a dream that was constantly changing. The various decorations in the rooms and the people who had died in them all appeared and disappeared one after another. Everything was stacked together in a mess. Limbs and eyes grew out from the gaps. It was chaotic, terrifying, and distorted. It wasn't as frightening as the normal dungeons, but it was like an illusion. It was very harmful to the mind. After looking at it for a long time, one would feel nauseous and have palpitations. The churning blood filled the entire room. The color was getting thicker and thicker. Guan Shan was also submerged in the blood. However, he didn't feel suffocated. Instead, he felt like he was breathing underwater. At the same time, the furious Carpenter felt that something was wrong. He regained his rationality. He looked at Guan Shan, who was standing in the middle of the room. The man who always wore a clown mask said in a deep voice, "According to the information, you should have lived for close to 100 years. But now, you seem to be in your 20s. So, you must have changed the flow of time in your body and stopped it at a certain moment. There must be a room in your body." Carpenter's heart skipped a beat. Before he could feel guilty, he realized what was wrong. The flow of time in the room had reached the limit of what he could do. It was 30 million times faster. At this moment, staying in this room for a second was equivalent to spending a year. He couldn't maintain this state for too long because it was a huge burden on him. It might even cause the flow of time in his body to become unstable. However, no one could last for more than a minute in such a fast flow of time. However, what made Carpenter suspicious was that after such a long time of changing the flow of time, the others had turned into old people. Only Guan Shan didn't change at all. No, that's impossible. A terrifying thought flashed through Carpenter's mind. However, he immediately rejected it. It must be that there isn't enough time. He's just stubbornly holding on. If I wait one more minute, he'll show his true form. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for me to turn old and die? Guan Shan suddenly spoke. Carpenter was shocked to discover that Guan Shan's voice was still as clear and powerful as a young man's. There was no change at all. How is this possible? How is this possible? Although I don't know why, I feel like you shouldn't wait anymore. Because, Guan Shan shrugged. Then, he took off the pain mask and revealed his young and handsome face. He said innocently, "The acceleration of time doesn't seem to affect me. P.S. Thanks to Jiao Yingyin and Starry Sky Eyes for their tips." Chapter 139. No use? How could it be no use? Carpenter's pupils shrank as cold sweat dripped down his back. No, impossible. You must be playing tricks. Carpenter quickly shook his head and retreated. He did not believe Guan Shan's words as he snapped. "Don't try to trick me. As long as you're a human, you can't resist the power of time. You must have obtained some sort of spiritual item from the Te and formation that extended your lifespan. No matter how long your lifespan is, under the power of time, you'll turn into dust. Yes, that must be it. Even if he increased his lifespan, how much could he increase it by? As long as he was a human, there would be a limit. There would be a day when he would grow old and die. If 30 million times was not enough, then 50 million times, 100 million times, until he reached his limit. Carpenter did not believe it and continued to increase the time flow in the room. In his rage and panic, he no longer cared if it would affect his stability and pushed his abilities to the limit. The surging sea of blood became violent and raged in the room like a storm or a tsunami. Even the space began to tremble, like a small boat in the middle of a huge wave. Let's see how you're going to continue acting. Carpenter stared fixedly at Guanshan. Veins bulged on his face and neck, and his skin turned red. It was as if his blood was boiling just like the blood on the outside. At this moment, the time flow in the overlapping space had exceeded 50 million times. The illusionary scene was blurred to the point that it was like a dream. Every second that passed was like 2 years. Under such a rapid flow, a normal human would die of old age on the spot within a minute. However, Guanshan shrugged. This time, he didn't even put on the mask of pain. He simply stood on the spot and cooperated with Carpenter's performance. 3 minutes later, Guanshan looked at Carpenter and asked helplessly, "Aren't you tired of staring at me like this? Looking at how hard you're using, it should be at least a few hundred years, right?" Carpenter's eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth. Impossible, impossible, impossible. He increased his strength once again. 5 minutes later, Carpenter's body began to show signs of aging. He looked at his hands that had clearly become more mature and completely collapsed. He roared and covered his head. "What the hell are you? A whole 1,000 years. You can't possibly be human." Absolutely not. Time is eternal. Humans are so weak, so insignificant. So how can they not grow old? All right, your performance should be over, right? As I said earlier, the acceleration of the flow of time has no effect on me. As for the reason, Guanshan stroked his chin as he slowly walked towards Carpenter. Perhaps it's because players won't age? Carpenter subconsciously took 2 steps back before stopping himself. What player? You don't understand? It doesn't matter if you don't understand. All you need to know is that I will definitely kill you. Guanshan then took out innocent children's drawing from his backpack. Carpenter sneered. Heck, kill me? Even if my ability is ineffective against you and I can't kill you, you can't kill me either. Do you really think I'm in this room? No, I'm not that stupid. Just like in the first room, you can't even touch me. How can you kill me? The basis of his control over the flow of time was that he had to be in a certain room before he could affect the person or object in that room. Therefore, even if Carpenter wasn't in this space, he must be in a certain room. However, he wasn't trapped in a certain room. Instead, he could freely move through other rooms. Therefore, Guanshan had a bold idea. Carpenter's room wasn't a real room, but a concept that could affect him. Because of his own experience in using a crowbar, and the fact that there were other ability users like Byakuya who had a conceptual ability, this deduction was much more reasonable. And judging from Guanshan's reaction, it was clear that Carpenter was acting strangely. This meant that it was very likely that the room was on Carpenter's body. Since the boss couldn't do anything to Guanshan and he could do whatever he wanted to the boss, then he might as well try his best to kill the boss. Guanshan didn't waste time talking nonsense with him and directly used innocent children's drawing in the middle of the room. In an instant, with Guanshan as the center, the entire room turned into a moving children's drawing of the underwater world. The blood turned into an almost equal sign shape of blue seawater, and the constantly changing strange objects turned into various kinds of fish. The fish were of different sizes and colors. They swam rapidly in the seawater, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Since you're in a 3-dimensional space, I'll turn the space into a flat surface. Guanshan had used it once in the hospital. Therefore, he knew that when this item took effect, the entire world would turn into a simple drawing. It would lose its original appearance, and most importantly, its thickness. Everyone would turn into a stickman, not to mention other things. Although Guanshan didn't know what the real situation was with this item, The simulator could at least provide feedback on the changes that happened to the item. Therefore, the flat surface should be real. In his eyes, Carpenter's eyes widened, and he retreated. "What the hell are you? Damn it, what did you do?" From the looks of it, Guan Shan was the villain. Carpenter watched as Guan Shan got closer and closer. He kept waving his hand as if he was chasing away something invisible. Guan Shan curiously reached out his hand and touched a deformed circular frame that suddenly appeared around Carpenter. In the painting, Carpenter was surrounded by a red two-layered circle. The outer one was slightly rounder, and the inner one was like a cashew with a part of it caved in. Guan Shan thoughtfully raised the crowbar and suddenly understood. So that's how it is. The room on your body is actually a placenta. Did you only take away your birth certificate, or did you kill your mother, take something, and then use it as your room? Carpenter suddenly panicked. No, don't. I need a door. Just like Byakuya said, as long as it's a room, there must be a door. Since it's on your body, I don't need to worry about where the door is or what kind of door it is. In other words, your ability was restrained by my crowbar from the start. Since your room is in front of me, you're already dead. Guan Shan muttered to himself. Then he swung the crowbar over, breaking through the red circle's encirclement and stabbing the stickman's body. The effect of naive children's drawing was removed. Guan Shan took a closer look and saw that his crowbar had landed on Carpenter's chest. The curved end of the crowbar had pierced right into his heart, killing him in a single strike. Oh, so it's the heart door. Carpenter died with his eyes wide open. Even in death, he couldn't understand why Guan Shan didn't age and why he died. P.S. Thank you to Old Man Arbitrary 5 million reincarnations. Encyclopedia, Book Friend 1610201305175590, Great Old 1A, and Thunderless Rain for their tips. Chapter 140. EXP plus 30,000. Final boss defeated. Simulation complete. This scenario will be destroyed. Please leave as soon as possible. Countdown. 00. 59. Guan Shan took 2 steps back and pulled the crowbar out of Carpenter's body. At this moment, Carpenter's corpse had already turned into an incomparably old and withered skeleton. Just like the victims that he had imprisoned, he opened his mouth and widened his eyes as he looked upwards with unwillingness. When Guan Shan opened the door to his heart, the original room on Carpenter's body lost its sealing ability. The time that had stopped for 100 years started to flow again on Carpenter's body. What really killed him was not Guan Shan, but time. The blood that filled the entire space had already solidified and then quickly receded like the tide. The door of light had long been closed, but those illusionary overlapping scenes didn't disappear. Instead, they just happened to combine into 4 frozen abstract scenes that were like a stage play. This is the life of the boss. Guan Shan was surprised. The wall that he was facing looked like a woman hugging a child. The child was lying in the woman's stomach that had been cut open and was eating the woman's body. Perhaps it was Carpenter's will before he died, or perhaps it was because of the mysteries of rule-type Esper powers. In any case, the scene that was captured by the simulator and displayed to Guan Shan was the life of the room carpenter. Even though the scene was strange, Guan Shan, who had been through hundreds of battles, did not feel anything. Of course, this was mainly because the boss was dead. He raised his eyebrows. Looks like I was right. The first thing that this guy did after awakening his Esper powers was to choose a room for himself. That way, he would be able to stop the flow of time in his body. Guan Shan only felt pity and pity for the innocent woman. Even before she died, she was still hugging her child. She placed her hand on the child's head and stroked his head. He turned his gaze to the other wall. On the second wall, the young man started to do evil and trapped many people in a cage. On the third wall, the young man discovered that he was also trapped in a cage. On the fourth wall, Carpenter's figure was no longer there. Instead, it was pitch black. In the middle of the wall was a statue of Xidagarba with only its upper body. Guan Shan's eyes lit up. This is the Xidagarba statue that he stole. Looking at it together, the story should be: the boss realized that although he had obtained immortality, he was trapped here and couldn't leave. After a long time, he finally couldn't take it anymore and wanted to leave. However, the first step to leaving was to extend his life. Otherwise, he would end up like this. Guanshan's guts were really big now. He even squatted down and dared to slap this already dead boss. Ha! Carpenter's head was directly chopped off by him and rolled to the side. I have nothing to be afraid of. It's just a cricket boss. Won't I be able to kill it with a crowbar? Guanshan stood up and walked arrogantly to the side of the wall. He took down the Xidagarba statue and looked at it carefully. The buff effect of this Xidagarba statue is the way for the boss to prolong his life. However, half of it is missing, so he can't use it. That's why he captured Lu Mingyi and White Knight. Now, everything is clear. At this moment, the entire space started to tremble. Guanshan did not need the simulator to know that this space was heading towards destruction. Guanshan sighed as he looked at the disappearing illusions. However, as the countdown reached its end, he realized a serious problem. F*CK, the door is gone. How am I supposed to get out? Guanshan looked up and saw the countdown timer, 0:21. Instantly, his expression froze, and his entire body froze. F*CK, 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 F*CK. Guanshan broke out in cold sweat. He frantically searched for a way out of this collapsing space. However, the owner of this space was already dead. The four walls were already blocked by something that was stacked on top of each other. Now that they had disappeared, there was nothing left. There was nothing but darkness around him. Where did the door come from? Guanshan watched as the countdown ticked away. His heart beat faster and faster. Anxiety and panic took over his heart. He was like a headless fly, wandering around in this space. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. F*CK the dog. I didn't expect the scariest part to be here. He was filled with regret. I shouldn't have been so happy. If I wasn't happy, I wouldn't have killed the boss so quickly. If I didn't kill him, I would have had a chance to get him to open the door for me. I wouldn't have been trapped here. 0:05. Guanshan's hands and feet were cold. He looked at the center of this dark space. Carpenter's corpse was collapsing inwards. It was like a black hole. 0:01. Guanshan could only helplessly curl up in a corner. He cried out in despair. Can anyone hear me? Little invisible, Byakuya, someone come save me. Save me. Boom. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and a white light flashed in this space like a thunderclap, splitting open the darkness. The white light was like a crack. It grew bigger and bigger until it completely shattered the space. Byakuya's anxious voice could be heard. Is this thing really useful? Guanshan felt the world spinning around him, and he was thrown into the white light. The space behind him instantly collapsed into nothingness. He subconsciously looked back and found that there was a huge eye vaguely in the middle of it. Guanshan. Shuman Lin's voice was right next to his ear. Lu Qiuqiu's voice was right next to him. Guanshan felt like he had just been on a roller coaster. He was dizzy and almost fell down. However, he was caught by someone. Lu Qiuqiu supported him and asked with concern, Are you okay? Huff, huff. What was that eye? Guanshan gasped for breath. He was so scared that he was covered in sweat. He touched his back and found that it was all wet. He couldn't help but gulp. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Everyone became nervous when they heard this. Byakuya hurried over. She was also given a fright when she saw him like this. She quickly comforted him. That room is really strong. It's normal that you can't beat it. I think I heard you call for help. This battle must have been very difficult, right? Guanshan was now covered in blood and sweat. He looked like he had just been through a fierce battle. Byakuya pressed Guanshan's shoulder and said sincerely, Don't be afraid. There's no need to fight anymore. I've called people over. They'll kill that damn room later and avenge you. He was heartbroken. Such a righteous person had been tortured like this. Another ability user holding a space blaster nodded. He's now trapped here. One more blast, and we'll be able to open up the space. He'll definitely die then. Guanshan wiped the sweat off his face. He looked at them in confusion. No, what are you talking about? The boss. I mean, the room has been killed by me. He raised the Xitigarbus statue in his hand. Look, I've got the statue. Bayaka, everyone, Bayaka's mouth twitched. She suddenly realized something. Then the blood on your body, oh. Guanshan looked down. It's all from the room. I stabbed the crowbar directly into his heart. The amount of blood loss is a bit high. PS1. Thank you to you, Meow. Information Night. Not Cute Man, Chipmunk Meow, Crutal, Superdimensional Slash, and Old Window Breeze for their tips. PS2. My period came today. I'm not feeling well. Chapter 141. The amount of blood loss was a little high. You call this a little high? Everyone's gazes were subtle as they looked at Guan Shan's bloody body. The fresh and warm blood was still dripping down. Yes, it could not even be called dripping. It was as if he had just been fished out of a pool of blood. Just by looking at it, they could imagine the victim's blood spurting out like a fountain. The scene was so tragic that they could not bear to look at it directly. Otherwise, they would not have been so worried just now. In the end, they did not expect that they had imagined the wrong person. The victim who had encountered such a tragic scene was not Guanshan, but the room. Everyone looked at each other, and the atmosphere became a little awkward. Bai first breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he worriedly circled around Guanshan. Are you really okay? You're not hurt? He looked at Guanshan's unmasked face in surprise. You didn't age? Guanshan waved his hand and stood up shakily. After thinking for a while, he said, I have a way to become immune to abilities related to the flow of time. Although he had been frightened by the countdown and the huge eyeball, his legs were still weak. However, after going through so many dungeons, his ability to adjust his state of mind had been tempered, even if he did not have an outstanding resistance to shock. At the very least, his ability to adjust his state of mind was trained. I can't say I'm okay, but I'm not hurt. Guanshan looked at Bai gratefully and sincerely. It's all thanks to you for saving me just now. I was scared to death. I almost thought I was going to die in there. Bai smiled awkwardly, thinking that Guanshan was comforting him in vain. You're scared? Like hell I'll believe you. If you act like a weak and helpless victim, the room that you stabbed to death with a crowbar would not rest in peace. Regardless of whether they believed it or not, Guanshan was indeed frightened. The countdown of the simulator could not be faked. He almost thought he would stay in the darkness forever. Guanshan let out a long breath. Looking at the open night sky above, he could not help but cry. Then, he suddenly froze. That's not right. Where's the roof? Guanshan quickly lowered his head and looked at White Knight. Where is this? Bai replied. It's a construction site in a small village on the border of Liaoshan. He explained, the ability of Room is to use the rooms in reality as a foundation to construct a parallel space under his control, but those rooms still exist in their original coordinates. So, although we seem to be walking between rooms, we are actually jumping between coordinates. This is also the reason why people who are trapped in this room can never get out. Outside this room is actually an endless void. Where your crowbar pried open is actually the channel between these coordinates. Bei stroked his chin. Although he was very curious about Guanshan's crowbar, it was obviously an extremely rare spiritual item. It would be impolite to ask about it, so he let it go. Guanshan looked at the person who had been holding a strange instrument since the beginning. By the way, who is this? White Knight curled his lips. Don't worry about him. He's just a tool. The tool man had no objection. He nodded, raised the instrument in his hand, and smiled. I'm just here to deliver a package. Now that the mission is completed, I should go. Otherwise, when the Tan Formations cops come, I won't be able to explain it to Sister Su Ling, a Tan Formations non-staff member, a member of the Yohao group's third team. The toolman took advantage of the night to slip away. His back silently disappeared into the darkness. At first glance, it was obvious that he was an experienced runner. White Knight coughed twice and said that Space Blaster can forcibly blast open a sealed space, but the premise is that there must be coordinates. I left something in that space before, so it can be used to locate the location. He whispered, but the problem is that this thing has not been registered as stolen goods. The Sister Su Ling he mentioned is a psychic who runs an underground black market. Her relationship with the Taiyan Formation is probably similar to that of a peddler and an urban management officer. If this thing is discovered by the Tin Formation, it will definitely be confiscated. Guan Shan was speechless. Have you forgotten that I'm also a member of the Tin Formation? White Knight pressed on his shoulder and said seriously, I believe that you won't betray your good brother. Guan Shan shook his head. I really won't. White Knight smiled happily. Then he heard Guan Shan say, But have you forgotten that I still have an official member of the Tin Formation with me? White Knight looked around blankly. Who? Is there no one else here? Shuman Lin. She walked to Baiye's back and patted his shoulder gloomily. F***CK. White Knight looked back and suddenly saw a living person. He was so scared that he jumped up and took 3 or 4 steps back. Ha ha! Guan Shan finally couldn't help but laugh out loud. Although he had been scared before, it was indeed more interesting to see someone else being scared when it came to this kind of thing. After he explained clearly to White Knight and promised that he wouldn't tell anyone about the space blaster, after about 5 minutes, a loud noise came from the sky. Then, a strong light from a searchlight shone on them. Guan Shan looked up and was stunned. Helicopters! There were a total of 2 helicopters in the sky. One was armed, and the other was transport. Their eyelids twitched when they saw it. The Tin Formation's lineup was really big. There was a relatively flat and open cement field in the construction site. The helicopters slowly descended there. A rope ladder was lowered, and a group of medical personnel and a psychic were released. When the medical personnel bandaged some of the minor wounds on everyone's bodies, the psychic introduced himself. Hello, I'm Cancel from the 3rd Squad of the Noon Brigade. Guan Shan's mouth twitched. Cancel? You're Control Z? The young man who claimed to be Cancel nodded. My ability is Cancel. Because there are no psychics who can reverse time, I was sent here after hearing about the situation. I can only cancel the effects caused by the same psychic ability 3 times at most. I can't do anything more. I see. Guan Shan nodded. After thinking about it, he thought that none of them should have suffered more than 3 times of time acceleration. They should be able to return to normal. Because the situation was the most urgent one, Lu Mingyi, who was the oldest, so he asked Cancel to cancel him first. White Knight and Cancel sat in the armed helicopter. Guan Shan was worried, so he sat in the medical personnel transport helicopter with Shuman Lin, accompanying the father and daughter of the Lu family. The pilot of this helicopter was another psychic with combat abilities. Phew! Guan Shan looked at the gradually widening field outside the window and leaned back in his chair. Only then did he have time to look at the interface of the settlement. Under the cover of the night, the helicopter flew to the base of the Noon Brigade. It first reported the situation with the Tin Formation here, before flying back to Hangzhou. Game simulation completed. Haunted house, final boss killed. 1-1, rating elite monster killed. 44, rating NPC protected. 55, rating acquired items. Xidigarba statue, incomplete, *1. Buddhist beads of the blade wielding monk *1. 100 years of solitude, *1. Bifurcated gun barrel *1, additional. Rating. Beyond, additional items to be acquired. Acquired reward. Game coins *32,000, skill points *2. Unlocked achievement. 360 safety guard. Protect all NPCs for 3 times in a row. Achievement reward. Backpack expansion *1. All rewards have been distributed to backpack. Please check. Your backpack is full. Excess items will be temporarily stored in the simulator. Please dispose of bifurcated gun barrel *1 within 3 minutes, or the item will be destroyed. Settlement complete. Please wait patiently for the next simulation to start. P.S. Thank you to Qin Shi Gujio and Lu Sun for the tips. Chapter 142. I knew this day would come sooner or later. Guan Shan sighed and looked at his backpack that was completely full. He felt that this simulator should not be called a horror game simulator. It would be more appropriate to call it a lattice crisis simulator. Previously, his backpack had 16 slots. Due to the use of some items and the expansion slots he obtained this time, it had changed several times. Now it was 14-17. There were only 3 slots left. After this dungeon ended, he obtained 4 items. The one that was exceeded by the simulator was undoubtedly the additional bifurcated gun barrel *1. Guanshan directly checked the details so that he could decide how to deal with this item. Bifurcated gun barrel. Effect. After installing on a gun-type weapon, the fired bullet will retain its original trajectory. There's a certain chance that it will randomly split into 3 to 5 new bullets. Description. As everyone knows, the trajectory of the bullet is not the only thing that can split. There's also what? Simulator, if you have the guts, explain it clearly. Guanshan could not help but complain in his heart. However, this item was easy to deal with. After all, he only had one gun to use. All he had to do was install it. The only problem was that he was not in his own home. He was in front of everyone. There were medical personnel all around. After confirming that Lu Mingyi's vital signs were not in danger, from time to time, some obscure gazes fell on Guanshan. They were curious, probing, and so on. After all, it was rare for a mutant from another group to suddenly appear from thousands of miles away. However, considering that he was brought out by the Tane formation, he should be used to the various strange behaviors of mutants. With this mentality, Guanshan took a deep breath. He endured the awkwardness of playing with a plastic toy in front of everyone and took out the Glock 17, burning from his backpack. Although this gun had been modified twice, its appearance did not change much. It was still an ordinary Glock 17. The gazes that were originally directed at him disappeared in an instant when Guanshan suddenly took out a pistol. Lu Qiuqiu was one of them. However, she was simply shocked. Then, she carefully shifted her gaze back to Guanshan. Lu Qiuqiu observed Guanshan's expressionless face and thought to herself that he definitely didn't like the prying eyes of strangers, so he was using this method to give an invisible warning. Combined with the scene of Guanshan calmly exploring that strange space and fighting those ferocious-looking ability users, the image of a powerful and reliable ability user who treated enemies and strangers as cold as the autumn wind sweeping the fallen leaves and treated acquaintances as warm as spring had already taken root in her heart. At this moment, Dr. Lu only felt that although Guanshan's warning method was a bit direct, the way he took out the gun was really cool, even making her heart skip a beat. Unfortunately, she was just an ordinary person, and she had seen how powerful superpower people were. That kind of power was beyond species. It was just like how humans didn't want to fall in love with ants, except for fortune lovers. Lu Qiuqiu felt that she didn't stand a chance. Moreover, Guanshan seemed to already have a girlfriend. Perhaps this was due to the suspension bridge effect, but it was destined to be a failure. Lu Qiuqiu's eyes couldn't help but dim. She looked at Lu Mingyi, who was still in a coma, and suddenly remembered the medical record that none of the parties involved remembered. She felt that she should find time to tell Guanshan about it. In private, Guanshan didn't care about what others thought. He only cared about the 3-minute time limit. The appearance of the branch barrel looked like a normal revolver's magazine. It was divided into 5 muzzles, and it was thicker than a normal barrel. After it was installed on the Glock 17, it instantly doubled the length of the pistol's barrel. After the 3rd modification, the gun that he took from Shuman Lin started to look magical. However, the power has greatly increased. Guanshan played with the gun in his hand and felt satisfied. The base damage is 200 points, at least 3 times the damage. It's already half of the Devil's Sword. Finally, it can keep up with the increasing difficulty of the dungeon. He put away the gun and continued to look at the only item that the boss dropped. 100 Years of Solitude. Effect. You can leave your current coordinates by tearing off the pages of the book. There can be at most 2 coordinates. If there are more than 2 coordinates, the nearest coordinates will be erased. You can teleport between coordinates. Current coordinates, 2 halves. Description. A strange old book that exudes the aura of solitude. Guanshan looked at the book curiously. From its appearance, it looked like an old Western version of 100 Years of Solitude that was published in 1967. It seemed to have been flipped through many times as the corners were wrinkled. However, there were no notes or notes. What surprised Guanshan was that after analyzing it for a long time, he finally confirmed that the title page of this book actually had the author Marquez's personal signature, and there was even a sentence that seemed to be a message. There was no doubt that the owner of the book was the dead room carpenter. He wondered if he was looking for his other hometown as a mixed blood from this book. Considering that Carpenter had lived for at least 100 years, it seemed quite normal for him to have a first edition of 100 Years of Solitude signed by Marquez. Damn it, this is too ridiculous. That room was a literary youth or a fan of Marquez. Speaking of which, if this is really the first edition, can it be considered a cultural relic? And the way he wanted to use this book was to tear it apart. Guan Shan couldn't help but sweat. He felt that if he were to be seen by someone who was a fanatic for books, he would be beaten to a pulp. However, this book had a total of over 400 pages. In other words, it could be teleported 200 times. Moreover, there was no distance limit. It could be considered a divine tool for escaping. Whatever, I'll tear it to my heart's content. A cultural relic isn't as important as its practical use. Guan Shan threw his worries to the back of his mind in the blink of an eye. To him, survival was the most important thing. The last item could be said to be the one that caused all these incidents, including the one that led Guan Shan to investigate the 3 pieces of news. Xidagarba statue, 1 incomplete. Effect: activate Xidagarba statue, buff 1. Description: it's missing half. Someone may know the clues. Guan Shan complained, just give Byakuya's ID card. Isn't he the only one who knows the clues? After this incident, Guan Shan's heaven and earth great shift had earned Byakuya's favor. It wouldn't be difficult to ask him for clues. In addition, game coins aside, he had now accumulated 4 skill points. He could level up his skills further. Gravity control directly to level 5. The range of gravity that can be controlled has reached 1,000 kilograms, a ton. The duration has reached 60 seconds. It's terrifying. Guan Shan was amazed by the max level effect of this skill. He obtained this skill because of the Killer Bee's sublimation candy. In other words, this was actually an ability that he might awaken. Generally speaking, if an ability user wanted to level up, they had to go through continuous training and breakthroughs. Under the catalysis of the simulator, this ability directly reached the peak of evolution. At the same time, in the base of the Noon Brigade, the captain of the 3rd Squad, Sun Han, looked at the surveillance footage from the helicopter. He held his elbow and tapped his chin. His gaze was focused on Guan Shan. This is the non-staff member that Celestial Xia Lei personally recommended. He killed room number 291 in the victim list. PS1. Thank you to fireworks like Water, Shadow, Pillow Alley, and book friend 2021030110412732540 for your tips. PS2 knock. Stare. Chapter 143. The team configuration of the Tay and formation in each area was basically the same. Each brigade was divided into 4 teams, and each team had their own responsibilities. The first team was focused on combat, the second team was focused on scientific research, the third team was focused on support, and the fourth team was focused on backup. Well, commonly known as cannon fodder, and the last 3 teams were usually there to support and serve the first team. In theory, this was how the rules were set and allocated, but in reality, because there were all kinds of strange abilities, especially those with special traits, no one stipulated that each ability had to have only one function, and sometimes it was impossible to recruit suitable ability users, so they could only fill up the slots randomly. For example, although Sun Han was the captain of the 3rd team of the Noon Brigade, her ability had nothing to do with support. Sun Han was a B-level special ability user, and her ability was called Fixed Point Explosion, nicknamed Bomber. As the name suggested, she could throw bombs. She could cause a delayed explosion in a certain location by touching it, and the maximum power she could exert at present was 2 tons of TNT equivalent. What did this mean? In the famous Oklahoma City bombing, the explosives carried by the terrorists were almost 2 tons of TNT equivalent, and that terrorist attack caused 324 buildings in 16 blocks to be damaged or destroyed, causing a fluctuation equivalent to a magnitude 3 earthquake. Seeing how Guan Shan and the silhouette being fought for a long time in the hospital, it could be understood how big the gap was. In short, Sun Han's ability was at the level of a city. In other words, B-level special ability, users themselves represented the level of a city. Sun Han was one, and so was Xiaolei. The reason why Sun Han didn't join the first team despite having such a strong ability was that the more powerful the bomb she set, the shorter the time it would take to detonate it. If she really set the bomb to be equivalent to 2 tons of TNT, then the moment she released her ability, she would die together with her ability. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Sun Han could only act as an amateur detonator, belonging to the auxiliary unit. But even so, her status as a B-level special ability user was still the same. In the Noon Brigade, she was equal to the instructor of the team. On the other hand, it could also be seen that even the strongest one in the first team was only a C-class paranormal. How big was the gap between the strength of the other teams? Sun Han saw Guan Shan suddenly take out a gun and intimidate all the medical staff. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. "You have quite a temper. I like it." Guan Shan's most iconic space-type storage ability was included in the information that was publicly available within the Taiyan formation, so she wasn't surprised. Standing beside Sun Han was one of her team members. Her name was Qi Xingyu. She was a beautiful middle-aged woman in her 30s. She wore a Chong Sam and had a well-developed figure. Her pair of peach blossom eyes exuded a charming aura. She looked particularly coquettish. Qi Xingyu's charming eyes were like silk. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, "It's not just big. I heard that when he showed his ability in front of the Taiyan formation for the first time, he directly killed nearly 20 people without any hesitation. He killed more people than the 2 criminals who were encircled at that time. If it wasn't for the fact that the psychologist tested it green, he would probably be on the wanted list right now. So far, he should have killed at least 100 people, right?" Sun Han clicked her tongue in wonder and joked, "If even this could be green, then those paranormals who turn red after killing 1 or 2 people are really a bit unlucky." Qi Xingyu looked at Guan Shan's face on the screen. "I heard that the killer bees and some paranormals have begun to call him Demon God. If I'm not wrong, this should be his code name." She licked her rosy lips and said with a smile, "However, he looks quite good. He's gentle and polite. I really want to see what he looks like when he's angry." The killer bees were almost all killed by him. How could he not be angry? Sun Han snorted. "You want to see? I want to see too." She clenched her fists and her eyes lit up. "I want to fight with him." Everyone in the Noon Brigade knew that Sun Han was a battle maniac and was addicted to eating. She relied on some special drugs to raise her physical strength to level D. Whenever she met someone, she would challenge them to a fight. If she couldn't beat them, she would use her ability to blow them up. Sun Han's opponents didn't dare to really fight with her. What if they didn't adjust their tonnage properly and were directly blown up? This made her feel very unsatisfied. So in the face of such a fierce opponent, Sun Han felt that her fighting spirit was stimulated. Then she looked down and frowned. What book is he holding? She couldn't understand a single word on the cover. It seemed to be English, but it didn't seem to be English. Anyway, it wasn't Chinese characters. Qi Xingyu narrowed her eyes and looked carefully, but she couldn't recognize it. Then the two of them looked at each other and could only silently take out their phones to recognize the picture. This seems to be the Western version of 100 Years of Solitude. What? What is it? Sun Han, who only had a junior high school education, looked confused and ran to search for what it was. Although she looked at it for a long time and couldn't understand it, at least she knew that it was a famous book, and the one in Guan Shan's hand was a foreign language version. Looking at Guan Shan, who was seriously reading, a strong sense of frustration suddenly surged in Sun Han's heart. She was most afraid of intellectuals. Sun Han slammed her head on the table in front of her. Shrouded in dark clouds, she was depressed. What should I do? I feel like I've already lost. She had completely lost. She had suffered a crushing defeat in another field. Damn it. Wasn't he a combat ability user? How could he have this kind of advantage that only brain development ability users had? Qi Xingyu laughed, rolled her eyes, and said, "Maybe he's pretending?" Sun Han raised her head. Qi Xingyu said, "Just like how we know his general situation, he's been in the Taiyan formation for a month, so he should also know the situation of the other groups of ability users. So maybe he wants to intimidate you in advance and avoid conflict. Okay, so that's how it is. Sun Han understood and then said fiercely, since he's so scheming, then I can't let him get what he wants. After they settle down, I'll fight him tomorrow. She turned her head to look at Qi Xingyu. You go and test him first. Just like before, use your charm to instigate him. He'll definitely take the bait. Guan Shan, who was seriously reading, didn't know that he was about to face a badger game when he landed. After he had upgraded gravity control, he secretly tried it out. Guan Shan chose the clouds as his test subject. The density of cumulus clouds was about 0.5 per cubic meter. Guan Shan's current range of control had reached 1 kilometer, and he could control 2,000 cubic meters of clouds to move. Therefore, in a sense, he could now even change the weather in a local area. However, it was useless in a large-scale situation. Moreover, if he was on the ground, then most of the clouds would be more than 1 kilometer away, and he wouldn't be able to control them. In the dark of the night, not many people noticed the movement of the clouds. The only one who noticed the abnormality was the pilot of the helicopter. He felt very strange because, from a certain moment, the sky became clear and the moonlight poured down without any obstruction. However, he quickly threw it to the back of his mind. After all, it was just that the weather was a little better and it wasn't a big deal. Guan Shan even secretly gathered the clouds and pinched them into the shape of a cat. He had a lot of fun until the skill went into cooldown. The remaining 2 skill points were divided as usual, and they were placed on magic pattern drawing and soul searing whistle. At this time, the pilot reminded, "Please get ready, we're about to land." Guan Shan put away his book and looked out the window. The base of the Noon Brigade was surrounded by a military base. P.S. Thank you to the person who almost laughed to death for the tip. Chapter 144. The main body of the Noon Brigade's base was surrounded by military bases, and most of the building itself was buried underground. If one wanted to enter, they had to pass through at least 3 checkpoints. In addition, there was also the automatic detection of the Taiyan formation badge. The helipad was directly set up inside the base, and in front of it was the last gate of the base. Guan Shan came down from the helicopter and saw Byakuya waving at him not far away. Revoke, who was standing next to Byakuya, seemed to be communicating with someone. The gate of the base was already open. The latter explained to Guan Shan and then sent the father and daughter of the Liu family to the base hospital to recuperate. Byakuya ran over with a serious face and whispered, "Just now, when I was waiting for you downstairs, I saw that the clouds in the sky seemed to have an abnormal change. It's very likely that it was caused by an ability user. But since the base didn't alert the police, maybe the Noon Brigade has an elemental ability user." It was common knowledge that an elemental ability user was born a B rank. Combined with the known information, could it be that the Noon Brigade had 3 B ranks? He sighed and said, "I've long heard that the strength gap between the various teams in the Taiyan formation is very wide, but I didn't expect it to be so wide. Other than Xia Lei, the highest level in the Youhao group should be Gao Yi, who is only a C rank." Byakuya suddenly froze, then looked at Guan Shan and said, "Oh no, it should be you now." Guan Shan smiled awkwardly. "I can't say that I did it, right?" Guan Shan perfunctorily looked at Byakuya with a strange gaze. At this moment, Byakuya had returned to his original appearance, from a beggar-like middle-aged man to a beggar-like young man. Byakuya was trapped in that space by Carpenter for more than a month. He didn't eat or drink, and it was impossible to give him the freedom to wash up. Although his appearance had returned to normal, his hair was still messy and his beard was unshaven. If he was put on the street and hung a sign saying, "Disabled but strong, out to work, my ID card was confiscated by a black-hearted boss. I urgently need money to go home. Please help me." Guan Shan shook his head. He remembered the young swordswoman's slash that cut the long-necked monster in half. He knew that he could not do it now. No. I think Gao Yi is stronger. He still felt a little guilty. After all, when they first met, he thought she was cosplaying, so he teased her a little. "You're being too humble. Gao Yi can't deal with the room. Or rather, those who don't have the ability to target him can't deal with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be listed on the victim list and be able to wander around for 100 years without being caught." Another unfamiliar female voice suddenly sounded. Guanshan turned his head and saw two women walking out of the base. The one in the lead was the one who had spoken. She was a heroic-looking woman, wearing a special black combat suit. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, and she walked with vigor. Behind her was a charming and voluptuous woman. The speaker walked over and extended his hand to Guanshan. "Hello, I'm Sun Han, the leader of the 3rd Squad of the Noon Brigade. This is Qi Xingyu, the deputy leader. The 1st Squad and their instructor are out on a mission, so I'm in charge of the base for the time being." The 3rd Squad, so they were the support? Guanshan also extended his hand. He subconsciously thought of the classic team classification of the Taiyan formation. Schumann Lin reminded him in the earpiece at this time. She's a B-class arcanist. Then she told him about Sun Han and emphasized, she probably wants to spar with you. Guanshan gave his exclusive customer service a thumbs up in his heart. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Spar? She's a B-class. Although I don't have any reaction, I'm at most a C-class. Isn't this bullying? But he was also a B-class. In the perspective of the simulator, he was at level 21, while Guanshan was only at level 15. In other words, Guanshan and Sun Han were at least 6 levels apart. Moreover, Sun Han wasn't an arcanist like Bai Yi who didn't have any fighting ability. Schumann Lin heard Guanshan's dissatisfied tone and her heart thumped. She felt that the word danger had appeared above Sun Han's head. She quickly comforted him. No, she won't. No matter what, she needs your permission before she can make a move. Otherwise, she will be punished for attacking her own people without permission. Guanshan chuckled. So far, including the other teams, has anyone rejected her? Lin Schumann was stunned. That's not true, Guanshan said. That's right. Everyone knows that she's so strong. So why hasn't anyone rejected her? She must have a way to make others voluntarily accept the spar. This was the same reason why there would always be employees voluntarily working overtime in the workplace. Moreover, arcanists had so many tricks up their sleeves. There were even more ways to take advantage of loopholes. Sun Han's ability was fixed-point explosion. If she didn't meet this requirement, then it should be this devilish Qi Xingyu. Schumann Lin suddenly understood. However, she usually only remembered some of the more important people. She couldn't find any information about this vice captain at the moment. Her ability wasn't enough to completely eliminate her presence in front of a B-class arcanist. It would be too arrogant to look up information in front of them. She could only wait until they were out of sight. Guanshan didn't mind. He smiled and said a few words to Sun Han, saying that he was able to kill the room because of the other people's indispensable help. However, Bai Yi wasn't a member of the Taiyan formation. He was an idle person who registered at the office and received a monthly allowance. He wasn't famous and didn't have any fighting ability. Schumann Lin didn't have much of a presence. On one hand, except for the people who often came into contact with her, people who had heard of her name would gradually forget it. On the other hand, the Taiyan formation deliberately reduced the leakage of information about her. Therefore, Sun Han directly classified these two people as ordinary arcanists. Instead, he was more interested in Guanshan, who was showing a completely different attitude from when he was in the helicopter. You can stay in the empty dormitory tonight. If you need anything, feel free to ask. Sun Han took them to the dormitory in the base and assigned them one room each. He said, after the death of the room, the bodies of the victims all reappeared in the original rooms. The Taiyan formation is investigating. The impact of the incident and the information of the past victims must all be archived. According to the regulations, for a case that involves such a large scope, you can only leave after the archiving is completed and all the information is confirmed. How long will it take? Guanshan couldn't help but ask. He still had work to do. He had to ask for leave from President Li and explain the situation to Shun Liangchuan. It was still a big problem to explain how he came to Liaoshan overnight. Sun Han pondered and said, "It will take about half a month. If you think it's too long, you can ask Xia Lei for an emergency transfer. Then you could go back to the Taiyan formation where you are." Guanshan shook his head. "Forget it. Isn't Mentor Xia busy fighting the killer bees? Let's not bother him." Half a month wasn't too long. It was acceptable. After Sun Han left, Guan Shan curiously looked at his single dormitory. Although it was called a dormitory, the conditions were not worse than some star hotels. It was funny. He was a member of the Yohao group, but the first time he entered the Taiyan formation base, he was in the Noon Brigade, which was thousands of miles away. Phew! Whatever. I can finally have a good rest. Guan Shan circled around the room and felt refreshed. He went straight to the bathroom. Although his clothes had been cleaned up along with the increase in his HP, he still felt a little uncomfortable. After taking a shower, Guan Shan threw himself on the bed. He was about to call Xin Liangxuan when there was a knock on the door. Qi Xingyu's soft voice sounded. "Mr. Guan, sorry to disturb you. I have something to ask you. Are you free? PS1. Thank you to the potato god. Not cute man, Akel, and old dominator A for your rewards. PS2 Bowl." Chapter 145. The vice captain, who smiled like a fox, was here to talk business? A man and a woman alone? Guan Shan was stunned. He turned his head and looked out the window. It was still dark when he arrived, but it was already dawn. Oh, it's daytime. Then it's fine. Wait. Guan Shan quickly changed into the clothes prepared in the room. It was a black combat suit in the same style as Sun Han's, but it was a man's suit. It was loose and breathable, and the cuffs were closed for easier movement. The inside of the suit was embroidered with the special symbol of the Taiyan formation. It was obviously a uniform issued to ability users. Because it belonged to the Noon Brigade, there was a horse-shaped dark pattern. If it belonged to the Yohao group, it would be a chicken. Guan Shan pulled up his sleeves thoughtfully. He suddenly understood why the members of the first squad didn't wear uniforms. In fact, no one in the entire Yohao group wore uniforms. If it were him, he wouldn't be willing to wear them either. Guan Shan jumped off the bed and quickly opened the door. He gave the beautiful woman standing at the door the standard professional smile of a reporter. "Vice Captain Qi, do you have anything to ask? As long as it's related to the room, I will cooperate." Then, he quickly closed the door with a cautious sound. Qi Xingyu was speechless. She stared blankly at the closed door. She couldn't maintain her smile anymore. The gentle and pitiful temperament she deliberately displayed was on the verge of collapse. He actually closed the door, directly closed it. Qi Xingyu had charmed so many people, but she had never seen such a card. The moment they met, they directly sealed off the path. Did he have to be so manly when he was alone? None of the men she had met before had directly closed the door. At least, they wouldn't be so vigilant. At least, they would first open the door and then talk to each other. Then, they would naturally be able to go in and sit down. This actually meant that the first line of defense had been opened, and the next step would be much simpler. However, Qi Xingyu had never been defeated at the first step. Guan Shan saw that she didn't speak, so he pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What's wrong? Didn't you have something to talk to me about?" From this pause, he could tell that this woman was up to no good. His previous guess was not wrong. Although he couldn't rule out the possibility that they were here to ask for information, it was clear that some improper purpose had taken over the other party's actions. Qi Xingyu was not someone who was easy to deal with. She immediately snapped back to reality and put on a charming smile again. "Some information about the room needs to be verified, and it may take some time. It's not good to just stand here. Why don't we change a place to talk?" Guan Shan raised his eyebrows. "Indeed," Qi Xingyu continued. "Then why don't you come to my office?" Guan Shan nodded and smiled. "Where's the base for breakfast? It's almost time. Why don't we chat while we eat?" Qi Xingyu? Question mark. Of course, there was a place to eat breakfast. In addition to providing breakfast for ability users, there was also a large canteen in the base. Now that Guan Shan had closed his door, the breakfast that was supposed to be delivered to his room was no longer within his consideration. As for the cafeteria, it was enough to accommodate more than 500 people. This was indeed the time for breakfast. Together with the support staff, Qi Xingyu tried to maintain a smile. "I'm afraid that won't do. The information about the room still needs to be kept confidential. A place like the canteen is still too unsafe." Guan Shan looked thoughtful. "I see." He suddenly had an idea. "Then there should be a special reception room in the base, right? If there's no other way, is there an empty interrogation room?" Qi Xingyu. Interrogation room? Guanshan nodded. I think the interrogation room is very suitable. It's highly confidential, there are seats to sit in, and the lighting is good. We can also buy some breakfast first. We can chat while eating. It's very safe. Qi Xingyu. Such a beautiful woman was right in front of you, and all you want to do was chat and eat breakfast in the interrogation room? Is there something wrong with your brain? If it was someone else, Qi Xingyu might think that the other party wanted to do something special. However, the person standing in front of her was Guanshan. She couldn't help but think of the fact that he had killed hundreds of people so far. The intelligence had also mentioned that Guanshan had eaten the parasites in the victims' bodies during the incident with Zhao Hong and his wife. This interrogation room was highly confidential, well-lit, eating breakfast, very safe, and so on. When she connected all these together, she couldn't help but feel an inexplicable sense of eeriness. Coupled with Guanshan's nonchalant and even slightly smiling expression, it was even more terrifying. Qi Xingyu felt like she was a piece of meat when Guanshan looked at her. She felt a chill run down her spine. Guanshan frowned. If the interrogation room doesn't work, in order to prevent him from coming up with another shocking and outrageous location, Qi Xingyu hurriedly interrupted him. I think the reception room is very good. The interrogation room isn't open to outsiders. If you want to take a look, I can take you there later. Guanshan shrugged and said, Okay, you lead the way. On the way to the reception room, Qi Xingyu didn't give up. She continued to move closer and said softly, Mr. Guan, actually, I have a personal request that I need your help with. How could she not know that Guanshan had noticed that she had another purpose? He was deliberately refusing her request. However, the more he refused, the more unwilling she felt in her heart. When they arrived at the reception room, Guanshan pushed the door open and turned on the lights. If it's a personal request, I can help if it's within my ability. However, I feel that there's something I need to make clear. He sat on the sofa and said seriously, Deputy Team Leader Qi, please respect yourself. I don't know what your purpose is, but I have a girlfriend. Guanshan raised his head and looked at Qi Xingyu. However, he suddenly noticed that her eyes had turned into a strange rose-red color. Her pupils were similar to the shape of a heart. F***. This time Guanshan was caught off guard. He felt as if he had fallen straight into a pink abyss. He had a sense of weightlessness. At this moment, his consciousness floated into the air. It was just like the feeling of his soul leaving his body in the soul leaving Mark. However, there was an obvious difference. Guanshan could still feel the connection between himself and his body. His vision was normal, but it was like he was drunk. His thinking became more and more sluggish. His attention couldn't help but be focused on Qi Xingyu in front of him. Oh, I didn't expect that I would succeed just by trying to force myself on you. Although Mr. Guan said so much, you don't seem to have any resistance to mental abilities. Qi Xingyu giggled and walked towards Guanshan. Her voluptuous and graceful figure exuded a mature charm as she moved. Isn't it better to have a girlfriend? This gentle face, the way you rejected me with a straight face. I really like it. She bent down, her breath smelling like orchids. Her slender fingers lifted Guanshan's chin. The cheongsam wrapped around her body was heavy, and it fell with gravity, almost sticking to Guanshan's body. My ability will make others fall in love with me without hesitation. If I fall in love with someone else, will your girlfriend be angry? Give me the same love. Love? So fragrant. I want a Guanshan gasp for breath. He only felt that Qi Xingyu's body exuded an unparalleled temptation. It made his heart beat faster and gave birth to an irresistible impulse. He swallowed his saliva and desperately restrained his rising instinct. Don't come over. At this moment, Guanshan's phone rang. Guanshan looked sideways with difficulty. The caller ID, Comrade Shun. PS1. Thank people, ghosts, immortals, and gods for their tips. PS2. Hey, leave a bowl here and run away. Chapter 146. It was a call from Comrade Shun. Guanshan's pupils constricted as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He woke up almost immediately and tried to raise his hand to answer the phone. Last time, Comrade Shun was a little angry because he didn't report it when he went back. If he didn't even answer the phone this time, wouldn't their relationship, which had just made some progress, fall back to square one? When Guan Shan thought of this, he even forgot that Qi Xingyu was beside him. But it was obvious that if he answered the phone, he would have a chance to explain. If he didn't answer the phone, then it would be GG. There was no need to think about the stakes of this multiple-choice question. Pan. However, just as Guan Shan raised his hand, it was caught by Qi Xingyu. Qi Xingyu smiled charmingly, and a strange light flashed in her pair of bewitching rose-red eyes. She glanced at the phone screen and turned to look at Guan Shan with interest. Comrade Shan, this is your girlfriend? Her supernatural ability came into play again. If there was a second man in the room now, as long as he was below C class, he would immediately fall under her pomegranate skirt. Even a C class would have an irresistible affection and love for her. This was the reason why Qi Xingyu's code name was Succubus. After being in the Noon Brigade for so many years, countless people had tried to pursue her. Even if they knew that it was the work of her supernatural ability, there were still many people who were willing to pursue her. Qi Xingyu's soft and boneless fingers followed the back of Guan Shan's hand and intertwined with Guan Shan's fingers that were holding the phone. Their 10 fingers intertwined, and she gently played with his palm. She narrowed her eyes and whispered seductively, "You obviously love me more. Why are you looking at other women? If you do this, I will be jealous." She straightened her chest and clamped Guan Shan's forearm. "Just look at me, okay? As long as you look at me, I will give you everything you want." Her supernatural ability gave her extraordinary charm, and her superior appearance and figure made her supernatural ability even more powerful. As early as the incident with Zhao Hong and his wife, the U Brigade had already discovered that Guan Shan himself was like an ordinary person with almost no resistance to spiritual abilities. At this moment, the spirit-type Qi Xingyu accidentally bumped into Guan Shan's weakness. However, she did not know this, so out of caution, she unleashed her abilities to the maximum. Hearing Qi Xingyu's constant muttering, Guan Shan felt a hint of hesitation. He felt as if everything before him had been covered by a layer of pink filter, and his thoughts had also sunk into a whirlpool of chaos. Was the person he loved the woman in front of him? Little Comrade Shun, Shindinghua. In fact, it's just that the long-term companionship has blurred the boundaries of their feelings. Guan Shan's eyes struggled between the name on the phone screen and Qi Xingyu's beautiful face in front of him. His cognition and thoughts clashed violently. His CPU was overloaded, and his brain was about to become a mass of paste. Qi Xingyu saw that Guan Shan's struggle was getting weaker and weaker, and his expression gradually became blurred. She secretly smiled proudly and glanced at the name on the phone that was still ringing. "Hee, your little boyfriend is mine? Phew, phew." But at the moment when Guan Shan's consciousness was blurred and he was about to press the reject button on the phone, he suddenly thought of Shun Dinghua's face and his heart full of love. It was not the face of his childhood sweetheart, who was always cute and cunning, but the face of Shun Dinghua, who was shot by him in the illusion. That warm and beautiful illusion, if it continued, seemed to be the last happy grave of all lovers, and also the best future that Guan Shan could imagine. So, should equal love be something like this? Shun Dinghua's words were like whispers in his ears. "Don't you always want to kill me?" In his mind, the string called reason seemed to be pulled taut in an instant. Qi Xingyu felt Guan Shan's hand on her back, and she was about to bend down to enjoy the fruits of her victory, when she suddenly froze in place, and the smile on her face also froze. Quietly, the cold and dark barrel of the gun was pressed against Qi Xingyu's lower abdomen. The moment Qi Xingyu lowered her head, her pupils immediately shrank, and a premonition of danger flashed through her like lightning, making her hair stand on end. Guan Shan was holding the newly modified Glock 17 in his hand. The muzzle was slanted upwards and quickly slid up along Qi Xingyu's abdomen. The next second, it was directly in the middle of her plump chest, leaving no time for her to react. This was originally a very ambiguous action, but Guan Shan's action could be said to be neat and full of murderous intent. You stop. What are you doing? Qi Xingyu panicked and hurriedly wanted to retreat, but Guanshan's other hand had already pressed down on the back of her neck, pressing her towards him. But how could she be a match for Guanshan, who had passively strengthened his strength so many times? She immediately curled up like a shrimp, like a cat with its hair standing on end. She lost her grip on Guanshan's hand, desperately trying to get him to move away, but there was no doubt that it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. Qi Xingyu thought that Guanshan had woken up and was going to settle the score, so she panicked and laughed in a trembling voice. I know I was wrong. Let me go. This is the base, and I didn't do anything harmful to you. If you kill me, it will be against the rules, and you will immediately be judged as a psychic and will be wanted by the Tan formation. Calm down. What did you do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. Guanshan looked at Qi Xingyu strangely, and then his gaze became incomparably gentle. He was obviously in a position where he was ready to shoot at any time, but he said softly, "It doesn't matter if I'm wanted. Anyway, I'll become a monster and a copy of the dungeon. Although it's very scary for me, but it doesn't matter." He lowered his head slightly, pressing his forehead against Qi Xingyu's forehead. His dark eyes reflected her face, and he indeed had an incomparably affectionate look. Just kill me. He wasn't awake at all, and was still under the influence of the psychic ability. In other words, the current Guanshan should be under the influence of the charm, and he loved her with the deepest love he could give her. But now Guanshan wanted to kill her. Qi Xingyu was drenched in cold sweat, and she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. She suddenly understood that the source of Guanshan's abnormality was her psychic ability. Was there a problem with Guanshan himself? Or was there a problem with her psychic ability? She couldn't figure it out, but it didn't matter. The important thing was that Guanshan was about to pull the trigger. Wait, stop. Quickly stop. Qi Xingyu was about to cry, and her heart was filled with regret. Her hand was still trying to pry open Guanshan's finger on the trigger. She immediately stopped her psychic ability in a panic, and the rosy red color in her eyes disappeared. Ugh! Guanshan was stunned, and he came back to his senses. He looked at the current posture of the two people and the gun in his hand, and suddenly jumped to the side with sweat. What's going on? Just now Qi Xingyu's life was saved, and she collapsed on the ground. She covered her chest with lingering fear, and quickly shook her head and waved her hand. No, it's not what you think. What do you mean by what I think? Is there something wrong with this role? Why are you more guilty than I am? What the hell happened? Why did he point a gun at Qi Xingyu? Guanshan was puzzled, but his thoughts were interrupted by the ringtone. Only then did he realize that the phone had been left on the sofa for a long time, and it was about to automatically hang up. Oh no! He hurriedly rushed over and answered the phone. Guanshan adjusted his breathing. Phew! Comrade Xiaoshan, what's the matter? Shen Dinghua suspiciously said. Xiaoshan, what are you doing? You're so reserved, and why do you sound a little out of breath? Ugh! Nothing, I'm not reserved. Guanshan had a guilty conscience as if he had been caught red-handed, and quickly said, I was just killing cockroaches, and I exercised a little too much. P.S. Thank you for seeing me before class segregation. Don't open fire. A reward from your own people. Chapter 147. Cockroach, who was almost killed, was speechless. Did you use a gun to kill cockroaches? Qi Xingyu had always prided herself on her beauty, and she had always been successful because of her supernatural ability. Now that she had been described as a disgusting cockroach, she was naturally annoyed. But when she thought of Guanshan's terrifying gaze just now, her heart trembled and her limbs went soft. No matter how angry she was, she immediately lost her temper. But it was precisely because of this that Qi Xingyu couldn't understand. What was this? Was it because of love? If that was the case, why was his girlfriend fine? If he fell for it so easily, it meant that he had almost no resistance to psychic abilities. But at the beginning, his attitude was very firm. Later, he could even struggle for a while. Although he was magnified by his supernatural ability, his feelings for this little comrade Shun should be at least as deep as what he had shown just now. Qi Xingyu shuddered when she thought of what Guanshan had said just now. He killed people without hesitation because of love, and he didn't even care about the Tan formation. Could this be green? Could it be that he had bribed the psychologist of the U Brigade? Qi Xingyu couldn't understand this because her own evaluation was already yellow. This meant that her moral values were relatively weak. She might use some gray means, but under normal circumstances, she would abide by the rules and laws of society. In layman's terms, it was chaos and order. This was also the state that most psychics were in. The Tan formation's criteria for recruiting psychics wasn't that their psychological state had to be green. There was a range, roughly between orange and white. Otherwise, the number of psychics on the job would be at least half, or even more. Psychics tended to have richer experiences than ordinary people due to their uniqueness. Many of them even drifted away from society. It was certainly impossible to ask everyone to maintain a normal psychological state. For someone like Qi Xingyu, at most, she would use her ability to corrupt her private life. As long as she didn't do anything harmful to others or society, and no one reported her, no one would care. Compared to the dangerous psychics who could easily kill hundreds of people, this was really insignificant. However, wasn't Guanshan the dangerous superpower user who could kill hundreds of people at the drop of a hat? He even bluntly said that he didn't care about being hunted by the Tan formation. Of course, what Qi Xingyu was more curious about at the moment was why nothing had happened to the little comrade Shun, whom Guanshan loved in such a way. Her gaze subconsciously fell on Guanshan's phone. However, as soon as she made this move, Guanshan immediately noticed it. In order to prevent this cockroach from using the same trick again and arousing Shun Liangchuan's suspicion, he immediately raised the pistol that he had just put down. The black muzzle was once again pressed against Qi Xingyu's forehead. Qi Xingyu. %yen%. I haven't said or done anything yet. Guanshan warned her with his eyes. Qi Xingyu quickly covered her mouth and shook her head like a rattledrum. Guanshan didn't want to use such direct and violent means outside of the pocket dimension. After all, he was forced to do so in the pocket dimension. In fact, he was a law-abiding citizen. However, the situation was urgent, meaning that he was in the same room with another woman and that the latter had bad intentions. A life was at stake, meaning that he would be killed by little comrade Shun. So he could only act according to the situation. Seeing that Qi Xingyu had calmed down, Guanshan heaved a sigh of relief. He then heard Shun Dinghua ask over the phone, "Cockroach? There's a cockroach in your house?" Guanshan explained, "I'm not at home. Didn't Officer Xia ask me for a favor last time? I was dragged by him to investigate an old case in the middle of the night. Now, I'm living in an empty dormitory in the police station. The conditions are a bit bad. Well, the Tan formation is also a police force. He is indeed helping the Tan formation, so there's nothing wrong with that. Sure lie, I'm counting on you to take the blame." "I see," Shin Dinghua said angrily. "Did you kill the cockroach? In this world, the most abominable things are mosquitoes, cockroaches, and rats. How dare it appear in Xiao Shan's room? Unforgivable." Guanshan glanced at Qi Xingyu and shook his head. No, the cockroach ran away. Although he didn't know why he took out a gun before, it was certain that Qi Xingyu had interfered with his special ability. It was one thing for him to be unhappy, but it was another thing for him to really take action. In this case, at most, Qi Xingyu would be punished, but she wouldn't be sentenced to death. Ran away? Shin Dinghua blinked on the other end of the phone. Xiao Shan wouldn't be so scared that he jumped up, right? He couldn't even catch a cockroach. How lame. He really did jump up just now? Guanshan said awkwardly. No. How is that possible? Shin Dinghua said regretfully. If poor Xiao Shan was at home now, I would come over immediately to comfort him and give him a hug of love. But there is no other way now. Guanshan couldn't help but say, actually, when I go back, I can give, Shin Dinghua said with a smile. As compensation, I will teach Xiao Shan how to catch cockroaches. Guanshan couldn't keep up with Shin Dinghua's jumping thoughts, but he was already used to his childhood sweetheart's whims, so he said helplessly, okay. Shin Dinghua said seriously, use mashed potatoes, boric acid, and sugar. The cockroaches will be poisoned and dehydrated after eating the boric acid. If they can't find water at home, they will go to the sewer or other places to find water to drink, and then die in a dark place where you can't see. How is it? Isn't it good? We don't have to deal with those cockroaches' bodies. Guanshan, of course, agreed. It does sound good. Next time we meet cockroaches, we should try it. Qi Xingyu heard it clearly and instinctively felt that this little comrade Shun seemed to be hinting at something. But Guanshan used police station instead of Tan formation, which meant that his girlfriend should be an ordinary person, so it should be kept secret. How would an ordinary person know what happened here? She must be thinking too much. Guanshan also explained to Shun Dinghua that he was now in Liaoshan and couldn't go back in a short time. Shun Dinghua said, President Li happened to be on a business trip to Liaoshan recently. You can contact her directly. Maybe she can help. Guanshan was stunned. President Li came to Liaoshan? What's she doing here? I think she went to a rural primary school in a poor area for an interview. She used to teach there, so she wants to do some publicity and donations there. Shun Dinghua supported her head and added, I heard my colleagues at the newspaper talking about it in the group. Got it. It must be that kid Lu Rue again. He knew everything. He was a real gossip king. Guanshan chatted for a while more and brushed off Shun Dinghua. After hanging up the phone, he breathed a sigh of relief. He turned to look at Qi Xingyu, put away his gun, and contacted Sun Han. Casually using your ability on other people in the base shouldn't be allowed, right? When Sun Han arrived, he saw a dazed Qi Xingyu and Guanshan standing on the side with his arms crossed. This scene was so classic that Sun Han subconsciously looked at Guanshan and asked, What did you do? Guanshan said angrily, You should say, What did she do to me? Sun Han immediately realized that Qi Xingyu had failed and even had a conflict. His heart skipped a beat, and he had to follow the procedure to check the traces of energy reaction on their bodies. The results were naturally all traces of Qi Xingyu's ability. I'm very sorry. I'm not strict enough with my subordinates. Please forgive me. Sun Han apologized awkwardly, and then said, I will remove her from her position and put her in confinement for a week. Such a punishment was neither heavy nor light. Moreover, Guanshan would return to Hangzhou in half a month, and the matters of the Noon Brigade would have nothing to do with him. But there was no other better way. Guanshan nodded. Okay. Also, speaking of which, can I go out during the period of cooperation? Under normal circumstances, acquiescence was not allowed, but Sun Han knew that he was in the wrong and was afraid that he would continue to report, so he nodded and said, This is okay, but you have to take our people with you. PS1. Thanks to Still Hymns, let go of my Cohen, you meow Li Li in the fog, gentle and single-minded, a say-sized little monster, gave vodka, guilty's reward. PS2 bowl. Ticket. Lao. Chapter 148. Although they had experienced such a small disturbance, Guanshan was able to stay in the Noon Brigade for the time, being in a relatively stable situation. The entire underground base was so large that it was beyond Guanshan's imagination. It was divided into at least a dozen areas. Even with Sun Han taking the initiative to act as a tour guide, it took him a long time to recognize all of them. Sun Han had originally arranged for Qi Xingyu to be Guanshan's guide, but now that Qi Xingyu had messed things up, she had no choice but to do it herself. Most of them were places that he, as an outsider, was not qualified to enter. They were all special training grounds for combat personnel, as well as important scientific research areas and equipment display areas. Out of curiosity, Guanshan asked Shuman Lin, who had been following behind him the whole time, if the Yohao group's base was the same. The answer he got was no. Guanshan also asked about the details of the Tan formation that he had missed due to a misunderstanding. He crammed in his current ambiguous understanding of the Tan formation. With Shuman Lin's explanation, Guanshan realized that the difference in strength between the 6 brigades of the Tan formation was not ordinary. Moreover, they were responsible for different things. The Noon Brigade, Midnight Brigade, and Shin Brigade were mainly responsible for related incidents caused by non-human things, including psychic items, psychic relics, and psychic creatures. Their ranks ranged from D to A. These things basically represented all the supernatural phenomena that normal people knew. For example, the Xitigarbis statue in Guanshan's hands was a psychic item. As for the last two, Guanshan had no chance to see them for the time being. The incidents caused by these things were often very influential. It could even be said that most of the myths, legends, and religious beliefs that existed on Earth today were related to these things. The three brigades responsible for dealing with these incidents all had at least one A rank and two B rank ability users. The U, Su, and High brigades were responsible for cases caused by ordinary ability users, and they were only responsible for A rank and below. The humble and studious Guanshan timely expressed his doubts. Then what about the A and S classes? Shuman Lin enjoyed playing the role of Guanshan's teacher. After all, she had already left her name on the textbook, but in reality, no one could remember her or recognize her. Shuman Lin didn't see the social death scene that she had expected, but she wasn't happy at all. With Guanshan here, she seemed to have finally found some sense of existence outside of work. Because Guanshan was not familiar with using the telepathic headset, once he put on the headset, once he had a strong question, it would immediately be reflected in the headset. Shuman Lin was the only one who was connected to this earpiece, so she naturally knew about it. Shuman Lin explained, in addition, there are 10 independent Heavenly STEM squads, each with 1 to 3 people. They are composed of A-class and S-class ability users. However, insignificant people like us don't know what kind of mission they're carrying out. We rarely hear about their movements. She was a little yearning, but they must be silently protecting world peace. World peace. These words made Guanshan want to laugh, but when he thought about how he had only faced C-rank ability users a few times, and how many times he had hovered on the edge of life and death, those strange abilities could often take people's lives when they least expected it. Then, how dangerous would A rank and above be? Guanshan restrained his smile, and also felt respect for these unknown people. According to the welfare standards of the Tan formation, these people could spend the rest of their lives in peace and squander without doing anything, but they chose to join the Tan formation and fight at the forefront. No matter what the reason was, they were worthy of respect. After Guanshan finished touring the entire base and provided some information about the room that he had previously guessed, he also asked Sun Han for 2 flower pots. He returned to the door of his room. Bai Yi, who lived across the dormitory, had just returned from his interrogation. Hello, Captain Sunday. Bai Yi was all smiles as he chatted with Sun Han and sent him off. Then, he turned and stood at the door of Guanshan's room, watching Guanshan open the door. Guanshan looked puzzled and said warily, What do you want? Don't you want to go back to your room? Bai Yi rubbed his hands. Let's go to your room and talk. Guanshan was speechless. The last person who wanted to come in was Qi Xingyu, but she was now in detention. What do you want to do? Bai Yi saw the strange look in his eyes and quickly clarified, We want to talk about the other half of the Xitigarbis statue. Oh, Guanshan suddenly understood. So that's how it is. Bai Yi was speechless. What else? Guanshan opened the door and walked in. He said seriously, I thought you were going to do something to me. Do something to you? I'm still young, and I don't want to die so early. Bai Yi followed him in, closed the door, and sat on the chair next to him. I'll be frank. The other half of the Xitigarbis statue is most likely in the hands of a B-grade arcanist nicknamed Venom. This person is on the wanted list of the Taiyan formation. He is currently wandering in the southeast region and is most likely to appear in the Yangtze River Delta. Guanshan was a little surprised. You're telling me so decisively? Although his original purpose was not to get the Xitigarbis statue, it would be a good thing if he could get a clue. Now that he had half of the Xitigarbis statue, he could not let it occupy the latrine. No, it occupied the latrine, but did not work. That would be a big loss. Bai Yi spread his hands. Who asked you to save my employer's life this time? When Lu Mingyi woke up and knew that you were the savior of his daughter, he immediately gave up this clue and did not even care that you took the statue away. What do you mean by took away? How could a player pick up equipment dropped from a dungeon, be called taking it away? Guanshan cursed in his heart, and then said, Then what about the details of this venom? If I continue to hire you to investigate, how much will it cost? It was more appropriate to find a professional to do this kind of thing. If Guanshan did not have the information left by Bai Yi, it would be impossible for him to come up with the 3 reports. This guy's ability to gather information was unquestionable. Bai Yi smiled like a profiteer, then raised a finger and said, "It's free. It's free just this once." Guanshan also smiled and said, "Because I saved your life?" Bai Yi snapped his fingers. "Exactly," he said seriously. "Generally speaking, if you want to hire me, it's at least 1 million. But if it's for a brother, it's free. In that case, I'm making a profit." Guanshan joked. "Of course." Bai Yi got down from the chair and stretched. "Sigh, but now we have to wait for this half a month to pass." He complained, "The Tin formation is so troublesome. I made the right decision not to join." After Guanshan sent Bai Yi away, he then asked Shuman Lin a question that he was very concerned about. "Last time I saw on the seal of the file, there was a human world in the Taiyan formation. Is there another place besides the human world?" Shuman Lin replied, "The place where psychics exist is divided into 2 parts, the human world and the border." "Border?" "Well, the border of the contact and the border of the border." Shuman Lin hesitated. "I'm not very clear, but it is said that only psychics above the S level are qualified to enter the border. However, I haven't even seen an S level, let alone above it. So, some people say that this is actually a joke by the founder of the Taiyan formation." Guanshan nodded thoughtfully. At the same time, he put the 2 flower pots on the table and took out an item that he had forgotten for a while from his backpack. "I seed *2. That's right, he decided to use this time to plan eyes. P.S. Thanks to a what FK, bad name, still hymns, and guilty for their tips." Chapter 149. I seed. Effect. Watering with your gaze will yield an eye. Description. Plant 1 today, and you will reap many more tomorrow. Taking advantage of his rare, free time, Guanshan took out the item that had been collecting dust in his backpack for a long time. He opened his hand, and in his palm were 2 things that looked like walnuts. They were similar in size, but they were much heavier than walnuts. The outer shell was very hard, and there was an obvious gap in the middle. The gap was dark and quiet like there was nothing inside, but if one stared at it for about a minute, one would notice that there was actually an eye inside. It was even moving slightly, and it would look at the person who saw it. This is not scary at all," Guanshan thought as he fiercely stuffed the 2 seeds into the flower pot and buried them in the soil. Even though this thing needed to be watered with his gaze, it seemed like it was a kind of plant that needed soil to grow. He had no idea how this worked. After planting it, 2 progress bars appeared on top of the flower pot. As long as Guanshan stared at the flower pot, the progress bar would slowly move, but as long as he stopped looking, the progress bar would move back at an even faster speed. This was also the reason why Guanshan had never planted this seed before. Guanshan estimated that he would have to stare at this thing for at least 3 days before the progress bar would fill up. Previously, he had been busy investigating the few cases, so where would he find the time to stare at it day after day? But now that Guanshan was trapped in the base and had nothing else to do, the simulator should not be doing anything. He did not believe that in such a safe environment, the simulator would find a chance to give him a scary game. Guanshan had already figured out the rules of the simulator. He firmly believed that as long as he stayed in one place and did not move, the simulator would not be able to launch a surprise attack on him. Therefore, for the rest of the day, Guanshan sat next to the 2 flower pots in a thinker's pose and stared at them in a daze. One afternoon, the female logistician from the base came by to tell him that the Lu father and daughter, as well as the 3 logisticians, were in good condition and had almost recovered. If he had time, he wanted to thank them. Guanshan maintained his calm demeanor and said perfunctorily, I know." The logistics worker looked at the flower pot with a head full of question marks. He couldn't see anything interesting about the flower pot. He wondered if this was the strange hobby of this foreign psychic. At this moment, Guanshan suddenly noticed that the progress bar on the flower pot had increased by a notch. Seeing that the logistics staff was about to leave, Guanshan hurriedly stopped her and said, "Wait, there's something I need your help with." The logistics staff's attitude was very good. He smiled and said, "Just give us your orders." Guanshan pointed at the flower pot. "Can you keep looking at it? Just like me." "Yeah." The logistics staff was now completely sure that this was the strange hobby of this Mr. Esper in front of them. However, looking at the flower pot wasn't too much of a request, so she nodded and looked at the flower pot. But this time, the progress bar didn't give him any face. It only increased by a little. An awkward atmosphere spread in the quiet room. Guanshan muttered, "Could it be a one-time use?" He waved his hand and told the logistics staff that they could leave. He also asked her to call Lu Qiuqiu and the others over. Guanshan touched his chin and made a reasonable guess. More eyes means faster speed, but one person can only provide one acceleration. So he tried to call Shuman Lin, who was next door, over as well. He found that the progress bar had increased by a lot, and it was still increasing. Then it became the two of them staring at the flower pot in a daze. Shuman Lin was already a little used to chatting with Guanshan, so she wasn't afraid of him. She asked curiously, "What's in this flower pot?" Guanshan shook his head. "I don't know." Although this thing was called the ice seed, he didn't know what it would grow into. After all, no one had ever planted an eye before, right? "Oh," Shuman Lin said again, "it's almost noon. Aren't you hungry?" Guanshan was stunned. Then he remembered that he rarely felt hungry or sleepy now. Ever since he broke through level 10, he seemed to have abandoned the physiological needs of a normal human. He would only feel a little hungry if he didn't eat or drink for at least 3 days. If he were to compare it to the realm of cultivation, he was definitely in the period of fasting. Eating was more to satisfy his appetite. But just as he was about to say that he wasn't hungry, Shuman Lin took out a chocolate bar and handed it over. "Here, want to eat? This is an energy bar specially made by the Tane Formation. 1 bar can last for a day. This way, you don't have to leave and can continue to keep an eye on it. Why are you so good at taking out chocolate bars?" But of course, Guanshan wouldn't refuse her kindness. Guanshan took it and tore it open. He saw that Shuman Lin had taken out a bunch of chocolate bars, biscuits of other flavors, and even long strips of jelly. It looked like a primary school student's spring outing. This jelly definitely didn't have any energy. It must be a smuggled product. Guanshan blushed with shame. "Do you usually bring so much food on missions?" He clearly saw that under her loose white dress, she was actually wearing a tight-fitting black combat suit. There was a special storage device tied around her waist with a circle of food. It looked like she had tied C4 explosives. Thinking about it, this device was definitely not used to store food. Shuman Lin realized that she seemed to have exposed something. She quickly shook her head and denied it. No, I don't bring this often, and I don't bring this much," she gestured guiltily. "Just a little." Guanshan had a subtle look in his eyes. Shuman Lin explained, "I often have to carry out long-term undercover missions. In order not to expose myself, I can't make too much movements. I have to be a human-shaped eavesdropper, so I have to bring enough food with me. Otherwise, my life might be in danger of starving to death." She scratched her face and said awkwardly, "Once, because I was undercover for too long and the mission was very important, I tried to keep my ability working, but it might have played too big a role. Later, even my colleagues in the Tane Formation forgot about me. Until the end of the mission, no one came to tell me, and no one came to pick me up." Guanshan couldn't help but ask, "And then?" Shuman Lin was even more embarrassed. She whispered, I fainted from hunger, and my ability gradually lost its effect. Later, the logistics team found me. Since then, I have always brought some food with me, but it's true that I don't have as much as I have now. Before her ability was upgraded, her body weight couldn't exceed 50 kilograms. Basically, she could only bring weapons and the necessary dry rations. Now, she was much more generous, and it was fine as long as she didn't exceed 70 kilograms. Guanshan felt that this child was really miserable. It was bad enough that she didn't have a sense of existence, but she was forgotten by her own people when she was seriously doing missions. He comforted her. "Don't worry, I will try not to forget you." When the father and daughter of the Liu family and the logistics team came over, Guanshan asked them to help keep an eye on the flower pot and help together. Only when their eyes were sore did they let go of this free labor. The next day, Guanshan wanted to continue looking for more people, but when he opened the door, he found Sun Han standing outside with a serious expression. "Qi Xingyu is missing." She said word by word. PS1. Thank you for the tips that I'll buy when I have the money. PS2. When I returned to school, I suddenly found that the dormitory relationship wasn't so good. It took some time to deal with the problem, and I feel that I might have to move out. Sigh, so troublesome. Chapter 150. Guan Shan was stunned. Qi Xingyu was missing? The corner of his mouth twitched. You don't suspect that I did it, do you? Sun Han was also stunned. She looked at him suspiciously. Also, Guan Shan was speechless. Damn it. He suddenly thought of Lu Qiuqiu suddenly telling him that her father was missing in the middle of the night. He subconsciously blurted it out. It felt like he was confessing without being pressed. Guan Shan could only continue as if nothing had happened. I mean, I've been staying in my room since yesterday and haven't gone out. Although I have a conflict with her, she shouldn't blame it on me. Besides, she was the one who made the first move. I know. Sun Han shook her head and looked at the flower pot in front of Guan Shan. Even when he was talking to her, Guan Shan didn't look away. Instead, he kept staring at the flower pot. There were only a few paranormals in the base. Sun Han had already heard about this outsider paranormal's special hobby yesterday. Of course, she also knew that Guan Shan hadn't left his room for the whole day after they parted ways. Although Guan Shan's behavior was indeed very strange, there was no evidence. Secondly, after Qi Xingyu was defeated, she carefully checked Guan Shan's past information. She found that although Guan Shan seemed crazy, in fact, every mission he completed was a meritorious service. He never implicated the innocent. He was very principled and straightforward. He didn't seem like someone who would backstab others. More importantly, she talked to Xiao Lei. The latter had a lot of trust in Guan Shan's character. He also mentioned that he had been on the verge of death several times just to save more ordinary people. This statement was also verified in this room incident. Whether it was the logistics staff of the Youhao group, the father and daughter of the Liu family, or the paranormal Bai Yi, who didn't belong to any organization, these three completely different participants affirmed Guan Shan's character when he was in danger. They used almost all kinds of compliments. Therefore, even though the situation was strange, Sun Han did not vent his anger on Guan Shan. Instead, he wanted to wait for the matter to be investigated further. Sun Han said with a serious expression, I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to ask for your help. I heard that you've investigated. Wait. Guan Shan was still staring at the flower pot. When Sun Han looked over, the progress bar had increased by a large chunk. Now, the first progress bar was about to reach its end. I can help, but can you do me a favor first? Guan Shan sincerely raised the flower pot in his hand and said, Look at this flower pot for 5 minutes. Sun Han? Question mark. Guan Shan's gaze was sincere. Just 5 minutes. If you think it's a waste of time, why don't we walk and watch? What kind of weird fetish was this to make people stare at the flower pot whenever they were caught? Sun Han took a deep breath and looked at the flower pot. All right, Bai Yi's already gone to the scene. I'll tell you the details first. Bai Yi should be very interested in this kind of thing. After all, he was known as the detective. Guan Shan nodded. He looked at the progress bar on the flower pot while listening to Sun Han. However, the first sentence she said made Guan Shan stunned. Xingyu went missing in the base. Guan Shan's eyelids twitched. In the base. This matter was too big. Even a fly would have to go through 3 layers of security to get in. Who could make a psychic disappear in their own territory under such circumstances? Could it be another room? Yes. Sun Han said in a deep voice. Yesterday, I put her in solitary confinement and asked her to go through the dismissal procedures by herself. There were 2 logistics people with her. Halfway there, she suddenly turned and walked into a passage that she usually doesn't use. That passage usually has no problems, but at that time, all the lights in the passage suddenly went out. When it came back on, Xingyu was gone. Guan Shan felt a chill down his spine. He laughed dryly. It feels a bit like a horror movie. In order to hide the fear in his heart, he coughed twice and quickly asked, Is there a psychic with such an ability? Sun Han said, Yes, but this psychic is called Signs, nicknamed Black Hole. He is currently far away in Russia and is still being hunted. In other words, it's impossible. It's not the work of a psychic. Could it be that she provoked some psychic item or creature? As Guan Shan was thinking, the progress bar on the flower pot was finally full. From the soil of the flower pot, the plant that instantly broke out of the soil grew at an astonishing speed, turning into a plant that looked like an orchid. However, what bloomed at the top of the grass was not a flower, but a variety of vivid eyeballs of different shapes. Blooming cluster of eyes. Effect. Through touch, you can share the vision of the eyes that have watered it. Description. Everything you see is your eyes. This mysterious eye seed finally revealed its true appearance. So, it was actually a surveillance device. And the reason why it was said to be vivid was because all the eyeballs on it were gurgling and rolling, full of vitality, looking very, lively. This is... Sun Han's pupils contracted, and she subconsciously took 2 steps back, looking at Guan Shan warily. She had seen many psychic creatures, but those that looked so evil on the outside were most likely the type that was extremely aggressive. Guan Shan smiled awkwardly and looked at the eyeballs on it. It's just a small toy, no harm. Sun Han glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. He was holding the flower pot an arm's length away from her, as if he was holding a time bomb. Why don't I believe you? Of course, Guan Shan noticed Sun Han's distrustful gaze, so in order to prove his innocence, he bit the bullet and moved the flower pot back a little. He reached out and touched one of the eyeballs on it. Look, it just looks a little scary, but it's quite docile. The eyes seemed to understand his words, and it even swayed its grass leaves, rubbing against his fingers like a cat. But unfortunately, not only did it not have the soft fur of a cat, but it was also full of translucent, strange mucus, making gurgling sounds that made one's scalp tingle. Guan Shan trembled all over, but then he froze on the spot, because the scene in front of him suddenly turned pitch black, and in front of him was the back of a woman who was stumbling. That Chong Sam, that figure. Why did it look so familiar? Qi Xingyu. Guan Shan was taken aback. He subconsciously wanted to move forward, but then he realized that his current perspective was fixed. This is the vision shared by someone who has watered the eye seed. Guan Shan instantly understood, but then cold sweat dripped down his back. This was because the few watering cans that he had found for free were all people that he knew and had interacted with before. But now, this vision was obviously the vision of the culprit who caused Qi Xingyu's disappearance. Who is it? If it's not those people I took the initiative to find, then could it be that the owner of this vision also secretly peeped and saw the flower pot? Or saw me? Guan Shan took a deep breath and felt that his whole person was not good. From this perspective, he was completely motionless as he watched Qi Xingyu screaming and running in despair in the darkness. He had been following behind her, but Qi Xingyu was oblivious, as if this person was a ghost. It was easy to imagine how the owner of this perspective was enjoying Qi Xingyu's sorry state in the midst of chaos. A somewhat familiar voice suddenly sounded, not in his ear, not in his mind, but as if it came from his mouth, so it was a little distorted. Guan Shan was shocked. Intuition told him that the owner of this vision had found him. The voice then laughed. Don't peek at this time. Oh, forget it. It doesn't matter anyway. She will return to reality soon. Go find her. In the box. PS1. Thank you so expensive. 20 yuan. Sharp haha. 202000320134352852830 book friends reward. PS2. The rental broadband can only be installed tomorrow. I wanted to stay in the dormitory for one more night, but the dormitory's broadband suddenly ran out of money. I obviously have a 4-year package. Moving my leg. I owe you a leg. Change telecommunications. Damn middle finger. Chapter 151. In a box. What box? Before Guan Shan could figure it out, his vision turned completely black. It was as if the owner of his vision had closed his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Sun Han appeared in front of him again. Sun Han looked at him in horror, as if she had seen something unbelievable. Guan Shan noticed that Sun Han was staring at his eyes. He subconsciously reached out to touch his lower eyelid and asked, "What's wrong?" Sun Han looked at him and said, "There was an extra pupil in your eye just now." She pointed at one of the eyes on the flower pot. "And this one has no pupil." So this was the external manifestation of the shift of vision? Guan Shan sweated. He could completely understand why Sun Han looked as if she had seen a ghost just now. If he saw such a scene on someone else, he would definitely be scared out of his wits. It was already very good that Sun Han could still chat with him normally and didn't arrest him on the spot. In short, you can treat it as a spiritual item that can share vision. Guan Shan told her what he had seen. That person might be the psychic who made Qi Xingyu go missing. Now, Qi Xingyu seems to be locked in a box by her. You could try to look in that direction. Sun Han frowned. Although Guan Shan said so, she had never heard of Guan Shan having such a spiritual item before. Guan Shan felt puzzled from Sun Han's silence. He could only say helplessly, "I can prove this ability." Therefore, he tried to touch the other eyes again and found the female logistician. Because this person belonged to the Noon Brigade, it was impossible for her to cooperate with him. So she was the most credible. Of course, at this time, the logistics personnel couldn't be doing personal things. Otherwise, Guan Shan wouldn't share another woman's vision. Every time Guan Shan said what the logistics personnel was doing at this time, he would let Sun Han check if it was correct. After 3 times, Sun Han believed him. Because Guan Shan was able to describe even the most minute details as if he was there, Sun Han had no choice but to believe him. In the next few days, Sun Han did as he was told and searched for places or items related to the box. But because Guan Shan himself was still a suspect, he could only stay in the base and do nothing. Although Sun Han was willing to believe him, Qi Xingyu's pursuers and supporters did not believe him. They only knew that before Qi Xingyu went missing, she only had a conflict with Guan Shan. If it weren't for the fact that Guan Shan had shut himself in and shocked many people with his outstanding achievements, these hardcore fans of Qi Xingyu would have rushed up to tear him apart. In particular, Guan Shan had heard that one of them was a member of the first squad of the Noon Brigade, a B-grade ability user who had always had an ambiguous relationship with Qi Xingyu. Fortunately, this person was currently out on a mission and would not be back for a while. As for Guan Shan, he had no interest in looking for Qi Xingyu and was happy to be free. He stayed in his room and remotely chatted with the 3 members of the Youhao group to understand the situation of their battle with the killer bees. After all, this organization saw Guan Shan as a thorn in their side and always wanted to kill him. Of course, he had to pay attention to the current situation of this organization, in case he suddenly turned on the simulator one day and did not know what had happened. As for the 3 members of the first squad, it was the first time they had such a direct and close communication with Guan Shan, so they were very active. This was especially so for Tang Ji, who had this sensory ability. When he heard that Guan Shan had recently obtained a spiritual item that allowed him to share his vision, he immediately forgot his previous fear of Guan Shan and expressed his desire to give it a try in excitement. But when he found out that this item could only be used by Guan Shan, he was very disappointed. However, a few days later, Tang Ji said that he had thought of another way to play it. Since Tang Ji could perform synesthesia with others, if his vision was recorded in the cluster of eyes, when he used his ability, wouldn't it mean that Guan Shan could also see the memories of others that he saw? Tang Ji was so excited that his saliva was flying everywhere. If it weren't for the fact that he was currently on a mission, he would have immediately flown to Liaoshan to test it out with Guan Shan. From this, it could be seen that the 3 members were not in a hurry, so they still had time to joke around. Besieging the killer bees was no longer a solo operation by the Youhao group, but a large-scale operation by multiple squads. It was said that half of the killer bees had been killed by the Taiyan formation. This was closely related to Li Li's betrayal, and Li Li's betrayal was directly because of Guan Shan. The Central Dispatch Department of the Taiyan formation also noticed Guan Shan, and there was a lot of controversy. Some people felt that Guan Shan had great potential and did not care about trifles. He was a talent. However, some people felt that he was ruthless, eccentric, and difficult to control. They felt that he might be a ticking time bomb. However, Guan Shan only cared about when the killer bees would die. Unfortunately, the remaining half of the killer bees would be more difficult to advance. The killer bee's nest was hidden very well. Even so, people had already seen the killer bees' miserable state of defeat, so there was probably no need to worry about them for a short period of time. The more exciting news was that once the killer bee's stronghold was found, There would be a level A ability user from the Heavenly STEM Independent Squad coming to support the battle. As one of the victims, Guanshan felt that it was very good. It felt so good to be in an organization. As Guanshan was thinking about this, he ended the day's chat and opened the door. He felt that he had been bored in the room for a long time, and it was time to go out for a walk and relax. As soon as Guanshan stepped out of the room, an extremely thin and transparent fishing line was placed on his neck, causing him to stop in his tracks. "You're Guanshan? What did Sister you say to you before she disappeared?" A very unfamiliar voice sounded next to him, full of anger. At the same time, the fishing line was drawn downwards, almost cutting through the skin on Guanshan's throat. "Relax my ass." Guanshan cursed in his heart. What he was afraid of really happened. The iconic fishing line represented the ability of the level B ability user, Luo E, which was pure psychokinesis. Just as Guanshan leaned back and was about to turn around and run to Sun Han for help, a familiar voice overpowered Luo Yi's questioning. Scene scan complete. Generating horror game. Generated horror game. White Valentine's Day. Plot loading. Please wait. Plot loading complete. Why is Valentine's Day white? Because you killed an epic love, and now the Avengers are ready to mourn for you. Asterisk note. Only by killing the final boss can this simulation end. Guanshan's vision blurred. A pale white paper man with a pair of empty, pitch-black eyes appeared in front of him. It opened its mouth that was filled with sharp fangs. F***CK. Guanshan was frightened by the sudden attack and took a few steps back, taking in his surroundings. There was wood everywhere, and the shape of the corridor was like the interior of a coffin. The floor was covered with white flakes that looked like flower petals. Only when one got closer would one realize that they were actually white paper money. At this moment, the paper money moved without wind, forming a whirlpool with Guanshan as the center. It spun rapidly, and the floor and walls that the paper money passed all had fine scratches. PS1. Thank you, Akel, Lily in the Fog, Tang Rue, Sword Out a Scabbard, and Little Cabbage for their tips. PS2. I've been moving things for a day, for trips, up and down the stairs. My entire arm and finger joints are numb, so sore that I can't lift them. That's all I can write.